Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeats.com.
We're still in our fundraising drive. That tells you something. You know, back in March of 1978, a friend of mine, Don Hoy, called me from Germany and said, "You got to come over and see this thing." In fact, he had already bought my airplane ticket, and when he called, and I flew over that night to visit this extraordinary international relief program running out of what was then West Germany, in countries all around the world. And they also ran communities for abused kids, which was their central core. And I was so impressed by it that when we came back, well, they hired our ad agency to do a fundraising tour up and down the East Coast with the children's orchestra that they had. And when we came back from that, when we were all done in August, we were sitting at the Kennedy Center with Herr Mueller, the guy who ran the program in Germany, Louise Richards, who was starting a program like it in Maryland, a community for abused kids, and Louise and I, and she was bringing our son, who at that point in time was like a month and a half old, and so she, breastfeeding in the Kennedy Center with Meister Rostopovich and Celeste Holm. And Herr Mueller turned to me and said, "Why don't you do something worthwhile with your life? Why don't you do what I'm doing? Start a community for abused kids." And I turned to Louise and I said, we were running an ad agency and an herbal tea company in Michigan at the time, and I was very unhappy with it. We were making good money, but I was very unhappy. And I said, "I'd love to do this." And she says, "Fine, let's do it." That was in August. In September or October, we had sold one of the businesses and closed the other, and moved to New Hampshire and bought a house and taken in some foster kids and just started the whole program, right? What became the Salem Children's Village, which just closed last year. So it ran for over 30 years, a great run. And what I had to do was go around and raise money. That was my job. Louise put together the program and hired Hal and Shelley Cohen to run it and whatnot. But my job was to raise money. And I went back to Germany in the late fall of '78, and I was complaining to Herr Mueller about raising money. What a difficult thing it is. And, it's humiliating to beg for money and et cetera. And he was like, no, you've got it all wrong. He said, "You are people who help with good works receive a blessing." He said, he was convinced it was a spiritual blessing, but he also pointed out that there was an emotional blessing, knowing that you're part of something that's bigger than you that is doing a good work. And he said, "So what you're doing," speaking to me, he said, "what you're doing is you're offering people an opportunity to get a blessing. You're not begging for anything. You're offering to give them something that's much bigger, much greater than the little amount of money that they're going to send you." And that really stuck with me all these years. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why, I'm not reluctant to do these fundraisers for Free Speech TV, because there's, at a really deep level, I actually believe that I'm giving you an opportunity to get a blessing. Now, it might just be, like I said, I'm not a spiritual seer, but so it might just be the emotional blessing of being able to say, "Hey, I'm part of something bigger than me. I'm helping out." But I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to do this. And I hope that you're glad to help. And if you haven't helped already, this is the last day of the fundraiser, come hell or high water, and we're still not at our goal. And that's not a good thing for Free Speech TV. So please call today, 877-378-8669, and make a donation. Thank you. The premium gifts that we have at various giving levels, with a $60 gift, you get a pocket Constitution and the Free Speech TV water bottle, and also the Know Your Rights cards come with the Constitution. With a $120 gift, you get my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle and pocket Constitution. With a $240 gift, you get my book, Rebooting the American Dream, plus my book, What Would Jefferson Do, plus the water bottle and the pocket Constitution. And with a $360 gift, you get the book that Lamar and I spent 17 years writing, Legacy of Secrecy. The major book, it's over 200 pages, just of footnotes. I mean, it's a meticulously researched book about the assassination of JFK, plus Rebooting the American Dream book, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle, plus the pocket Constitution. That's with the $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. But the key here is not, what the goodies are, although some of them are kind of cool, especially Legacy of Secrecy. But the key here is that Free Speech TV is, really good people work in Denver making this network work. Just some genuine people who are wildly underpaid, and some really good talent on this network, and some really important programming. We need to strengthen this, not just help it survive, but strengthen it. Please, whatever you can do to help, please do it today. This is the last day. Thank you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, boy, we've got a lot to talk about. There's actually Republican donors who are telling Republican members of the Senate, you don't give us this tax cut, which is all this health care bill is. You don't give us this, literally, it's a $33 billion tax cut just for the 400 richest Americans. Now, if the difference between a 20% capital gains rate and a 23.8% capital gains rate equals $33 billion over a decade, these guys are making some serious, serious money. In the meantime, the Supreme Court has ruled that nothing wrong with the government, state governments giving money to churches, so long as it's for a playground or, recycling toxic waste. Shredded tires, which are toxic waste. That's a great new way to get rid of an item that they used to actually have to pay because they were too toxic for landfills. Remember that? You had to pay to get rid of tires. Now they just stick them out there with the kids. Anyhow, so that's what they did. And Austin Peterson is on the line with us, former Libertarian candidate for president. Facebook.com/producer Peterson, Petersen. You can tweet him at AP4LP. Austin, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tom. Nice to see you.
Back at you. So you said that, if I'm correctly quoting you, it's ridiculous to deny this church access to this program as if it was some sort of question whether the funds would be used to promote religion. They're not. Is that your position on this?
Right. It's kind of a lose-lose situation because the true answer is that the government shouldn't be giving this money to anybody whatsoever if I had my druthers. But it relies on the interpretation of the 14th Amendment, right? How broad do we interpret the 14th Amendment? As liberals who believe in things like gay marriage, for example, we praise the court when it passed Obergefell, for example, and they used the 14th Amendment for that. But they also used it for this situation, which claims, of course, religious discrimination in terms of the question of whether the privileges and immunities should be laid out equally. So if we rely on that broad interpretation for things like gay marriage, then I think it has to be applied if it's to be applied consistently.
I thought this was about the establishment clause in the First Amendment that Congress shall have establish no religion for the country and shall not support any religion. But well, okay. So you're saying that because the money is going to the church, and the church is then using that money to pave their parking lot with toxic shredded tires, then that's an okay use of it. Isn't that the opposite, or the inversion of the Republican argument against money going to to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood, a small percentage of their funds are used for abortions. And so the Republicans are saying, no, we can't send any money to Planned Parenthood at all because some of that money might pay for the common expenses. The bookkeeper, for example, who also, keeps track of the abortions. And so you can't give any money to them. How can you, money is fungible. How can you say that this money's only going to the playground? Maybe the church has plenty of money for the playground. They're going to use this money for, I don't know, a bonus for the preacher.
Well, hey. That's why I call myself a small libertarian in that sense. I completely agree with you, Tom. I mean, the money should definitely not be going to anybody. They shouldn't be sending this money out to any of these nonprofits at all whatsoever. Because, to me, I think that you never know where the money's going to go.
No, I get it. Absolutely. You don't want money going to public schools. I know that, and we've had that conversation before. And this is a private school, but the money was available just to the public schools in the state. And, now the Supreme Court has said, no, you can give it to religious schools as well. Well, are you saying that we don't have a disagreement here? I mean, is this the...
I'm saying we don't have a disagreement, Tom. For the first time in probably our 5 or 6 years of sparring back and forth, it seems like we don't have a disagreement. I mean, really the question is the establishment of religion, right? You're talking about established religion. If we were to go back to American history, you remember the Constitution was only meant to apply to the federal government. It was never necessarily meant to mean that the states couldn't do this kind of thing. And the Missouri Constitution actually states very clearly that the money that state money is not supposed to go to religious institutions, which is why this got kicked up.
Along with 29 other states, and this goes back to Massachusetts. When Massachusetts was about to enter the Union in 1789, the guys doing the ratifying conventions, particularly Virginia, came right out and said, we will not allow Massachusetts to enter the Union as long as they continue their taxpayer support for churches. In Massachusetts, you had to pay a tax to the government that was then passed along to the churches on a weekly basis. I mean, it might have been collected monthly. I'm not sure the details of it, but basically it was passed along to the churches as essentially your tithe. And if you didn't show up in church, the state, the police, paid for by the state, would go to your home and to either put you in the stocks or take you to church. And everybody else in this country, the other 12 states said, that's not America. That's not what we envision. That's not what the Establishment Clause says. That's not what the First Amendment says. Massachusetts, you have to change your laws if you're going to join the Union. And Massachusetts had a huge internal debate about that. I mean, it was a fascinating little piece of American history, that year 1789. And they ultimately decided, okay, we'll do away with the Puritan laws in exchange for membership in the United States. But, this is like bringing back the Puritan laws.
And so in a way, I think, I've read your books, Tom. I mean, almost nobody knows more about this history than you do. So I would definitely defer to your knowledge on this. But I'll just say that, when we started to get away from the concepts of federalism and we started to lean more on like the federal government supremacy clause, for example, with the passage of the 14th Amendment, we certainly got away from the sort of vision of the founders as it was originally intended.
Right. The 14th Amendment ended slavery, and most of the founders were slaveholders.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it gave equal protection to everybody, not just white people. But anyhow,
which is why we've had things like civil rights acts, which were definitely needed in order for us to have a restoration of what the true vision was. I mean, you know for a fact that while people like Jefferson and may have held slaves, they called for the abolition of slavery during the
Jefferson did. Patrick Henry did. Patrick Henry, Andrew Jackson, another major slaveholder, would go to his grave fighting for slavery.
There were abolitionists.
Yeah, Adams was not a slaveholder. Yeah, Austin Peterson. Thank you, Austin.
Thanks, Tom.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day. There's a pile of it right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Rachel in Kiev, Ukraine, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Rachel, what's up?
Hi. I've just been trying to follow everything about this healthcare debate and feeling like as you always say, tag Europe, get involved, and living abroad. And I'm still like, registered to vote, but all of my in Massachusetts, my senators and my particular representative, they're already basically on the right side of things. So I don't know. Does it make sense to call other people if you're not like registered in that state, or what can I do?
Typically senators and congressmen increasingly, particularly Republicans, are feeling free to ignore out-of-state or out-of-district calls, and in some cases they've even reconfigured their websites so that you can't even send them an email unless you plug in your zip code and your zip code happens to be in their district. I understand some of them are even blocking calls from area codes that aren't in their districts in some of their district offices. But that said, there's still social media, Rachel. There's this morning, just about an hour ago, if you look at my timeline on Twitter, I went to TrumpCareToolkit.org, and you can click to tweet, and they've got these little graphics on there that go out with your tweet. This one, and you just click it, and like, for example, Shelley Moore Capito in West Virginia, the Republican senator, you click it and it says, Shelley Moore Capito, 128,800 West Virginians will lose coverage under Trump Care. Vote against it. And so that graphic, along with your message, don't make the mistake that your House colleagues made, goes out on Twitter. As long as the tab that you have open on your browser, as long as you have your Twitter tab open, so you're active on Twitter, you can click right on these and tweet them right out. So there's lots of resources out there. I mean, that social media is a pretty powerful one, and I would think contacting everybody you know back in the United States and asking them if they want to participate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you, if not here, maybe later write down what that handle on Twitter is to look for?
Oh, it's there's actually a whole website for it. You just click on the icons, and it automatically invokes Twitter. The website is TrumpCareToolkit.org.
Okay, great.
So pretty straightforward and easy to remember, and TrumpCareToolkit.org. So good luck, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thanks for the call. Great to hear from you. So, amazing. I'm gonna really dig into this. Oh, I was looking at the wrong camera. I'm really gonna dig into this in just a minute. But the Republican donor class is now explicitly threatening Republicans in the Senate, saying, "Where the hell's our tax cut? You promised us an almost $1 trillion tax cut, and you were going to throw those 22 million moochers off of Medicaid, and we don't have our damn tax cut. And it was supposed to be retroactive to the beginning of the year. Where is it?" And the Republicans are going, "Well, yeah, we have Democrats." But Democrats have nothing to do with this. They don't run the Senate. They don't run the House. They don't run the White House. They don't run the Supreme Court. This is all the Republicans. It's amazing the stuff that's working out. We'll be back with more of your calls, my thoughts, and in particular the news of the day. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's get through some of the news of the day. First of all, I just teased this at the top of the hour. The Yahoo, this red painter writing over at Crooks and Liars, Yahoo is now reporting the big-name GOP donors are cutting off donations to Republicans until they see major action on health care and taxes. That's in quotes. What they really want is a guarantee that the middle and lower caste class will be punished, broken, and bankrupted so that the top 1% gets richer, pays less in taxes, and gets to stomp all over the rest of us. This is Red Painter's opinion. I don't disagree with him. Yahoo reports that a donor from Texas, Doug Deason, has, quote, refused to host a fundraiser for 2 members of Congress and informed House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy his checkbook is closed as well. Deason told Republican leaders, quote, get Obamacare repealed and replaced, get tax reform passed, you control the Senate, you control the House, you have the presidency. There's no reason you can't get this done. Get this done, and we will open it back up. It being, of course, their purse, their money pile for Republican politicians. And then Red says they are using any means necessary to twist arms, punish, and berate the Republicans into doing their bidding. My bet is that this money is worth more to many of these GOP senators than their own constituents' lives. So you've got really two things going on here. One is you've got Republican donors saying, like the Trump network or the Koch network last election, 2016, dropped $800 to $900 million into the election, if not more. That was just went through the net, what they proclaimed was going to go through the network. So you've got that. That money is going to be withheld. And at the same time, right now, you've got Mitch McConnell sitting on about $200 billion. Now, he's got, so far, 6 Republican senators who are saying, I don't think I want to vote for this thing. But when the CBO scored it, they said, wait a minute, at the end of 10 years, there will be $188 billion in savings from the federal budget. Now, in order to pass this via reconciliation, where there can't be filibustered, it can't be amended, the Democrats can't stop it, in order to pass it that way, where only 50 votes are necessary, they have to make sure that it does not add to the budget deficit. Well, this is actually going to reduce the budget deficit over a decade by $188 billion. So Mitch McConnell can take that $188 billion and he can say to Dean Heller, hey, how'd you like a $1 billion program for Nevada for opiate treatment? He can say to Rob Portman, how'd you like $1 billion for Ohio for opiate treatment? He can say to Pat Toomey, hey, I can give you $2 billion for Pennsylvania. How much money is it going to take? Mitch McConnell has $188 billion he can pass out. And the billionaires, the right-wing billionaires have, arguably far more than that they can pass out. How much money is it going to take? I think that it's not going to take $188 billion. I think Mitch McConnell, frankly, now has enough money that he's going to be able to buy the votes of all but 2 senators. We'll see. But my cynicism when it comes to Republicans and money in politics is intact. Now, there was another piece of, that was kind of the good news from a Republican point of view in the CBO score yesterday. Another piece of, quote, good news, particularly if you're on Social Security. George W. Bush in 2005 tried to privatize it, do what Pete Peterson wants and take that $2.7 trillion and put it in the banks with Wall Street so that they can skim money off the top and the banksters can make a fortune, and then they can pass a small piece of that fortune along to Republican lawmakers who help make it possible. Bush really worked at that. He blew it, but he tried. But speaking of Social Security, the Congressional Budget Office says 3 billion $3 billion will be saved over a decade in Social Security by these changes to Medicare and Medicaid. Now, why would that be? Well, it's kind of good news, bad news. Approximately, this is from Think Progress. Approximately 17,000 people could die next year who otherwise would have lived if a Republican health care proposal endorsed by the Trump administration becomes law. By 2026, the number of people killed by Trump care could grow to approximately 29,000 in that year alone. So we're looking at a total of 209,000 Americans dying because they lacked health insurance or health care, access to health care. 209,000 Americans, this is according to, based on the Harvard University's study from 2009, 209,000 Americans dying because of this Trump care proposal. And those dead 209,000 Americans, they're not going to draw Social Security. So the Social Security Trust Fund gets $3 billion, or will accumulate it over the next decade, because all those people, all those Americans are going to die. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. But the Republicans think this is really cool stuff. Another thing that was in the CBO, and I'm guessing you're not hearing most of this on corporate media. You're certainly, if you or any of your relatives watch Fox News, I guarantee you 100% they don't know any of this stuff. This Fox News is propaganda pure and simple for the Rupert Murdoch billionaire class. Topher Sphero tweeting, wow, CBO, premiums for a 64-year-old with middle income. This would be, somebody who is, in the middle income category, earning around $40,000 a year. Right now, their ACA premiums are $6,800 a year. If you're earning $40,000 to $50,000 a year and you're 64 years old, you're paying $6,800 a year for health insurance. around $700 a month, a little over $700 a month. Under the BCRA, under the Senate bill, under Trump Care, your premium, if you're 64 years old and earning $50,000 a year, your health insurance premium will go from $6,800 to $20,500. Get ready for a $20,000 annual health insurance premium. Yep. Amazing. And the CBO actually lays out, by the way, why employers will dump 4 million people from their health care rolls next year if this Trump Care bill passes. You'll recall that, the spokeswoman for Donald Trump came out and said, Kellyanne Conway, she said, if you don't have employer-provided health insurance, if you're on Medicaid, state-enhanced Medicaid, because you're working at, some place that doesn't offer health insurance for a minimum wage job, then just get a better job. Get health insurance like Kellyanne Conway has. Right? That was her sales pitch. Well, this is what the CBO said, and I'm quoting from the CBO report, the Congressional Budget Office, their scoring of Trump Care. Under current law, the prospect of paying the employer mandate penalty tips the scale for some businesses and causes them to decide to offer health insurance to their employees. Thus, eliminating that penalty would cause some employers to not offer health insurance. It's real simple. Right now, as an employer, if you have more than 50 employees, if you don't offer health insurance to your employees, you pay a penalty to the federal government. In many cases, it's cheaper just to offer them health insurance. Trump Care does away with that penalty. So once you do away with the penalty, what happens? Well, by the way, going back to those people who were saying to the Republicans, if you don't, this is that story that was over the top of Crooks and Liars. GOP donors threaten Congress, no tax cuts, no money. 400 Americans, the richest 400 Americans, the Forbes 400, just those 400 people are going to get a $33 billion tax cut. Now, just let that over in the next decade. Just let that sink in. That's over $3 billion a year that they're paying in taxes on the spread between the 20% capital gains rate and the 23.8% capital gains rate, which means that $3.5 billion is like, what, 3% of their 3.8% of their tax bill? Which means they're paying a lot more in taxes, which means they must be having mind-boggling incomes. Well, yeah, you've got 10 people on Wall Street right now who are making $2 billion a year each, and they're paying a maximum 20% income tax. Remember Donald Trump promised to do away with that? The carried interest loophole that allows you to pay capital gains taxes if you're a bankster? Yeah, Trump said he was going to do away with it. Fat chance. He's doubling down.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
But Jeff Merkley sent out a nice little fundraiser. The bill would give $33 billion to the richest 400 Americans, an amount that could fund health care for 700,000 Americans.
We're still in our fundraising drive. That tells you something. Back in March of 1978, a friend of mine, Don Hoy, called me from Germany and said, you got to come over and see this thing. In fact, he had already bought my airplane ticket and when he called, and I flew over that night to visit this extraordinary international relief program running out of what was then West Germany in countries all around the world. And they also ran Communities for Abused Kids, which was their central core. And I was so impressed by it that when we came back, well, they hired our ad agency to do a fundraising tour up and down the East Coast with the children's orchestra that they had. And when we came back from that, when we were all done in August, we were sitting at the Kennedy Center with Herr Mueller, the guy who ran the program in Germany, Louise Richards, who was starting a program like it in Maryland, Community for Abused Kids, and Louise and I, and she was bringing our son, who at that point in time was like a month and a half old, and so she, breastfeeding in the Kennedy Center with Meister Rostopovich and Celeste Holm. And Herr Mueller turned to me and said, why don't you do something worthwhile with your life? Why don't you do what I'm doing? Start a community for abused kids. And I turned to Louise and I said, we were running an ad agency and an herbal tea company in Michigan at the time, and I was very unhappy with it. We were making good money, but I was very unhappy. And I said, I'd love to do this. And she says, fine, let's do it. That was in August. In September or October, we had sold one of the businesses and closed the other, and moved to New Hampshire and bought a house and taken in some foster kids and just started the whole program, right? What became the Salem Children's Village, which just closed last year. So it ran for over 30 years, a great run. And what I had to do was go around and raise money. That was my job. Louise put together the program and hired Hal and Shelley Cohen to run it and whatnot. But my job was to raise money. And I went back to Germany in the late fall of '78, and I was complaining to Herr Mueller about raising money. What a difficult thing it is, and it's humiliating to beg for money and et cetera. And he was like, no, you've got it all wrong. He said, you are people who help with good works receive a blessing. He said, he was convinced it was a spiritual blessing, but he also pointed out that there was an emotional blessing, knowing that you're part of something that's bigger than you that is doing a good work. And he said, so what you're doing, speaking to me, he said, what you're doing is you're offering people an opportunity to get a blessing. You're not begging for anything. You're offering to give them something that's much bigger, much greater than the little amount of money that they're going to send you. And that really stuck with me all these years. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why, I'm not reluctant to do these fundraisers for Free Speech TV, because there's, at a really deep level, I actually believe that I'm giving you an opportunity to get a blessing. Now, it might just be, like I said, I'm not a spiritual seer, but so it might just be the emotional blessing of being able to say, hey, I'm part of something bigger than me. I'm helping out. But I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to do this. And I hope that you're glad to help. And if you haven't helped already, this is the last day of the fundraiser, come hell or high water, and we're still not at our goal. And that's not a good thing for Free Speech TV. So please call today, 877-378-8669, and make a donation. Thank you. The premium gifts that we have at various giving levels, with a $60 gift, you get a pocket Constitution and the Free Speech TV water bottle, and also the Know Your Rights cards come with the Constitution. With a $120 gift, you get my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle and pocket Constitution. With a $240 gift, you get my book, Rebooting the American Dream, plus my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the water bottle and the pocket Constitution. And with a $360 gift, you get the book that Lamar and I spent 17 years writing, Legacy of Secrecy. The major book, it's over 200 pages, just of footnotes. I mean, it's a meticulously researched book about the assassination of JFK, plus Rebooting the American Dream book, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle, plus the pocket Constitution. That's with the $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. But the key here is not, what the goodies are, although some of them are kind of cool, especially Legacy of Secrecy. But the key here is that Free Speech TV is, really good people work in Denver making this network work. Just some genuine people who are wildly underpaid, and some really good talent on this network, and some really important programming. We need to strengthen this, not just help it survive, but strengthen it. Please, whatever you can do to help, please do it today. This is the last day. Thank you.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Wow, what a day, huh? Nick in Minneapolis, listening on AM 950. Hey, Nick, what's on your mind today?
Hi, good morning, Tom. I would just like to start saying thank you for being out there for us, and also to all the other AM 950 hosts. It's great to listen to you guys.
Thank you, Nick.
My thought is with this health care bill passed or being passed, and the Democrats, somewhat arguing against it. If it does go through, my challenge to the wealthy Democrats out there, if they do by chance benefit from this by themselves getting a tax benefit, to lead by example and donate those funds that they do receive from this health care bill to worthy causes, the American Disability Act or Veterans of Foreign Wars, so they can utilize that money that they will be getting from the tax break themselves.
You're talking about the $33 billion that's going to go to the wealthiest 400 Americans?
Correct.
I guarantee you they are not going to use that money to provide, social safety net services to average working Americans. If they had any interest in doing that, they wouldn't be threatening Republican legislators with withholding support in the next election if they don't get their tax cuts. This money's going to go straight into Swiss bank accounts.
Yeah, I was more speaking to the effect of the wealthy, and I'm not sure how many of the 400 would be considered Democrats. Maybe they are all 400 of them staunch Republicans, but the Warren Buffetts and the Clintons, and in our state we have Al Franken, and so if they do benefit at all from
the Clintons aren't rich enough to make this, for this to be a big deal for them, and Al Franken's not rich at all. It's I get what you're saying, Nick, and it's a noble thought, but these are not noble people, and these are people who, if they weren't born rich or didn't stumble into their riches, and in some cases, earn at least some portion of their riches. But I think anybody who's got more than $1 billion has had considerable help, particularly from government along the way. But if these people hadn't been born rich, they would be on TV on the hoarding show. You would see a special on them about how they were hoarding newspapers and tin cans and stuff. I mean, they've got obsessive compulsive disorder. Anybody who's a billionaire who's obsessed with the fact that they're having to pay an extra 3.8% in taxes, when their taxes are already almost 20 points below that of average working people, has a mental illness, in my opinion, is sick. And that's something I think that we just need to acknowledge. Nick, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Mark in Prairie du Sac, Wisconsin, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I tried calling Ron Johnson's office this morning and got voicemail rather than the live person I got when I later on called Tammy Baldwin's office. So he must be getting a lot of calls. And what's interesting to me is Ron Johnson is now opposed to the scant pre-existing condition that's in the Tax Cut Act, and considering that his daughter apparently one of his daughters was born with a severe congenital heart defect and relied on a public facility to treat that heart defect back in the day, 30 years ago. That it's just sad. I mean, it is sad that
this is probably the clearest example we've seen in a number of years. I mean, there have been a whole bunch of them that are more obscure, the giving away of federal lands and stuff like that. But one of the clearest examples that we've seen in several years of billionaire donors giving money to Republicans in exchange for legislation which is going to return more money to the billionaire donors than what they spent on the political contributions. In other words, the old phrase that I believe it was one of the Koch brothers used back during the 2012 election, as I recall, was, we expect results from our investments. And in fact, I think, it might not have even been one of the Koch brothers. It was one of these very wealthy donors. Might have been the Mercer family. But in any case, they said, they said, we expect results from our investment. They view putting money into politics not as, a noble thing, not as a nonprofit gesture, not as a making our country better. They view it as an investment that will produce a return directly to them. And that's how crass this has gotten. It's just terrible. Mark, thanks a lot for the call. Kelly in Canyon Lake, Texas. Hey, Kelly, what's up?
Gal, you got the name right. First-time caller. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I got Sirius Radio just so I can listen to you.
Well, thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, it's true. And listen, I just heard this morning that a Wisconsin Republican senator made the analogy about health care with car insurance, meaning that we have to allow these companies to be able to raise prices based on people that have conditions. They already have a precondition. It's the same as dealing with an auto insurance, and that's exactly what he said. Right. I was so dumbstruck with the logic that I sat there and I said, so what happens to somebody that wasn't their fault and they got hit? What happens about the cases of a car accident when nobody's involved? It was done by weather or whatever. Or, you know what I mean? It was so incredibly illogical that he made that analogy, and he did it on public radio.
Yeah, and what happens to the person who gets cancer because not because they were smoking, right?
Correct.
I mean, in Republican world,
on. I am so disheartened that people could sell their souls. You don't have to even believe in God. You just have to believe in a higher spirit, that there's something that you're doing about taking care of your neighbor.
Yeah, you don't even have to believe in a higher spirit. You could just believe in human decency.
Yes, human decency. And it's just, I'm so distraught.
Yeah.
That we've come to this.
I'm with you, Kelly.
I hope that maybe the backlash that you're helping promote and other people will take a wash through this society and let us know that for the first time we're going to take the lead again. We're not going to be the 30th in medical care. We're not going to be the first and the most expensive medical care. We're not going to be the only industrialized country in the world that allows a pay for profit unless people walk away with over $500 million a year in salary governing our health programs.
Right. Very, very well said, Tripper. Well said. Spot on. Excuse me, Kelly. Thank you, Kelly, for the call. Tripper is up next, actually. Decatur, Georgia. Hey, Tripper, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. How you doing?
Good.
Man, so, yeah, I hear what you're saying about the Koch brothers and their return on investment thing. And, I'm a taxpayer, and myself and all the other taxpayers in this country, we demand a return on our investment, too. Yeah. And that's in the form of the commons, things that help everybody. And I'm just kind of like looking down the road, and I'm kind of like a worst case scenario kind of guy. And I'm seeing, a country where, grandma's getting thrown off the cliff. People are dying so they can save money, like what you're talking about before. They're saving money on Social Security because now people are dying and not being able to collect it. We're going to come to a point where we're going to be a nation of people with nothing left to lose. Yeah. And that's a very dangerous place to be.
Well, that's happening in Appalachia and in poor communities across the United States right now. And I'm going to talk about that in the second hour today. But that's very much where we're at. And
then when you have a nation with people with nothing left to lose, you have people taking drastic actions, which then ramps up police presence, which then creates a police state, which then creates, this completely and total civil unrest and this complete and total us versus them scenario, which in a way might be a good thing because it might unite people finally to say, hey, you know what? It really is those guys up there on the hill, not the hill as in government, but I mean the 400 elites who are the puppeteers, and I feel like a lot of this is like they know, like the elites, they know it's coming, they know change is going to come, and this is like the last big score, the way like crooks always have that one big score. I feel like, because this is just so in your face, we're going to kill you off, like, so we can get more money out of you. It's just so in your face that I really believe that this is like a last hurrah. Like, let's get as much money as we freaking can, before the political pendulum starts swinging left.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And all of these negative social outcomes are basically the core. At the very bottom of all of this is a handful of very, very, very wealthy people who are willing to invest in politics. Want to have more of their taxes returned to them. They don't believe in progressive taxation. They don't believe in any taxation. And by the way, they're not only pushing for the health care reform, they want after that, they want so-called tax reform.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Civil War, anybody? Brought to you by your favorite local billionaires. That's what's going on, at least right-wing billionaires. And welcome back, John in Long Beach, Mississippi. Hey, John, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's up?
I think we all should. I'm looking at the political system. I'm thinking about this bipartisanship. Nothing gets passed. Nothing gets done unless it's agreed upon. So these people who agree upon things that are going to be to our detriment, why don't I can't understand why they're not exposed.
Well, first of all, this is not bipartisan. There are no Democrats in the House or Senate who are supporting this effort. None.
No,
Zero.
I understand that. I'm talking about things in the past, and I'm thinking about in the future as well. You know, nothing's ever done unless it's agreed upon.
Well, no, that's not true. If you've got, I mean, Obamacare passed without a single Republican vote, and now this repeal of Obamacare and giant tax and the repeal of the Obamacare tax increase will probably pass without a single Democratic vote. So, you know, they don't need bipartisanship.
Then if that is the case, then don't you think that these people who are voting to have these things passed, those people, whoever they may be, if it's to our detriment, they should be exposed. We should find out who they are. I mean,
well, I think they're quite public about it. I mean, you know, the guy who's leading the thing right now is Mike Pence on behalf of presumably the Koch network. He's in tight with them, and he's been coordinating all the work between the House and the Senate. And he's kind of the point man on the whole thing. He's also the guy who keeps hiring old Koch-related people, you know, people from the various Americans for Prosperity and all this stuff, all these Koch groups, into positions, high positions in the federal government, in the White House. Mike Pence is the one who is, in my opinion, doing the most damage here. Donald Trump is just the useful idiot. But Mike Pence is a scheming, right up front shill for the Koch network and their buddies. And, you know, that should scare the hell out of everybody.
It does, and I think that Mike Pence himself probably was he's probably one they like to see as president to begin with.
Oh, absolutely.
He will be.
Absolutely.
But the thing that throws me off is this here. If these people who are being supported through the Koch brothers and big money and the corporative world, if they're being exposed, how come there's not that much? Why can't more attention be put on them so the public can see what they're about, and then we can make and then decisions that we make will be able to make better decisions.
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, I guess that's the media's job. That's my job, and you know, to get the word out, and I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah,
so how are we doing on time?
I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tom.
Okay. Thanks a lot, John. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is. Yeah, we only have 30 seconds, so I'm not going to put another caller on until we hit the break because it just wouldn't be fair. But it is so clear to me, particularly as I've been reading this book, Democracy in Chains. Every weekend I read another 4 or 5 chapters, and just, you know, my head just reels. It is so clear to me that the hardcore right-wing, mentally ill billionaire class, the ones who have the hoarding syndrome, the ones who are willing to have people die just so long as they get more money, that they are willing to risk civil unrest, they're willing to risk the destruction, and in fact actually even encourage the destruction of rational political discourse in our country in exchange for more money, more taxpayer dollars in their personal pocket. And that's a sad commentary on the state of affairs, and the Supreme Court enabled it. Thom Hartmann here with you. Rick in Weston, West Virginia. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
You know, it seems to me the billionaire class and these large corporations are just hell-bent on destroying American democracy. And I believe the American voters, or people are eligible to vote, even though there's a lot of voter suppression. They bear some of the responsibility by not taking more active in the democratic process. But you see it all the time. The previous caller said, you know, I think to myself, what is it going to take when people finally wake up? Is it going to take another Great Depression, or is it going to take what calamity? You
Or
know,
a world war.
Well, you know, you heard about Syria. You know, that's a classic ploy to Republicans: start a war, take people's minds off other things.
Yep.
But you know, honestly, some days I get up and I think about the whole situation. I wonder if this country's got another 50 years to go. Thank you, and have a good day.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. You know, it's a tough one. Corky in Hilton, New York. Hey, Corky, what's on your mind today?
Hello. Yeah, I heard it on CNN the other night where they said they're trying to erase President Obama's any legislation he passed. And then I went back and I watched the Correspondents' Dinner because I got it taped. And you could see Donald Trump seething, you know, just coming all out of his face the way President Obama was humiliating him.
Oh, yeah. I was in the room. I watched it.
They got a thing going, and they're using Donald Trump, and he's letting them because he wants to destroy everything President Obama left behind.
Yep. I agree. I think that, you know, the only question in my mind is whether this is being driven by Donald Trump's ego, vanity, and rage, you know, because he's big on revenge, or if there actually is a anti-Obama legacy project within the Republican Party, like the old Reagan legacy project. You know, I don't know if this is something that all the Republicans agree on. Yes, let's destroy every accomplishment that Obama did, or if this is, you know, singular to Trump. I don't know the answer to the question, but you know, it's pretty grim. Anyhow, Corky, I got to move along. Thank you for the call. Jenny in Elgin, Illinois. Hey, Jenny, thanks for listening to WCPT. What's up?
Hi, thank you, Tom. I respect your opinion, and I was wondering your opinion on this. Do you think things might have been different if the DNC would have adopted the single-care health plan, and we might not even be where we are today with this? Because I'm really concerned about my health care.
Yeah, I may be wrong, Jenny, but I thought that single-payer health care was part of the Democratic Party platform that Hillary Clinton ran on, or at least a public option that included Medicare for all. I'm sure that was the case.
I was watching the thing on C-SPAN or whenever they had it when they were shopping out the platform, and they did not want to do that because they did not want to insult President Obama. He worked so hard on this thing, and they didn't want to insult him and hurt his feelings. Oh yeah,
you're right. I remember that now. So what it did call for then was Medicare as an option, as a public option to be built into Obamacare. Which would have, I mean, really, everything that's wrong with Obamacare can be fixed by simply adding a public buy-in at any age for Medicare, and you know, at a reasonable price. I think broadly the Democratic Party supports that. So, Jenny, the problem here is not who's got good ideas and not what's going on in the Democratic Party. The problem here is a bunch of billionaire oligarchs who have basically taken over everything, and that's not good. That's not good at all. Jenny, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Scott in Canaan, Maine. Hey, Scott, what's up?
Hey, Tom, let me turn you down real quick.
Thanks.
Okay. Hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. As usual, you're doing a great job. I had a couple of questions and a comment. Okay. My first question to you, Tom, is why aren't they talking about doing any kind of reform or repeal to the federal retirement system that the senators and the congressmen have? Like, their health care is subsidized by us, and their retirement is subsidized by us.
Right. You really need to ask that question, Scott?
Well, I'm just saying, you know, it's all Republican, and I think a lot of people don't know how involved that system is. And
it's very generous.
And we're paying for it.
It's very generous. On the other hand, it's not anywhere near as generous as the compensation programs for executives in most of America's big companies. So,
exactly.
If our legislators would just do their damn jobs and not be wholly owned subsidiaries of Koch Industries or Koch Brothers, I would be far more charitable about it. But I think, spot on. Scott, I got to move along, but thank you. Brian in Hutchinson, Kansas. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, I just want to talk about how capitalism, the way it's set up, the way it's done, will always result in a concentration of wealth and an accumulation just continuing until they, a small percentage has most.
Unless there is a strong presence on the other side of that balance scale that can balance the power of aggregated capital, of aggregated wealth. And historically, the only thing that can balance that power has been government. So in those countries, like all the Scandinavian countries, most of the Northern European countries, in those countries where government is large and strong and represents anywhere from 35 to 50% of GDP, because college education is free, housing is subsidized, healthcare is free, public transportation is ubiquitous and high quality and all those kind of things. In those countries where that's the case, then you don't have these massive concentrations of wealth. There's only one billionaire, I believe, in Sweden. It's the founder of IKEA, for example. And a lot of his billions were accumulated outside of Sweden. So, it is possible to have regulated capitalism balanced by the power of government, which is the point that FDR kept making. It's just that the capitalist class, the billionaires, don't want that to be the case, or at least the right-wing billionaires, the bizarro billionaires. I mean, there's some very good progressive billionaires out there, and God knows we need a lot more of them. But thanks a lot, Brian. From Brian to Brian. Brian in Houston, Texas. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Tom, how are you?
Good.
My view of what's been happening since 2008 is that Obama's election touched off a catalyst. It was a catalyst in the right-wing part of the Republican Party, and it gave them some individual to focus their hatred on.
I agree.
And so everything that has followed from that moment was generated by the election of Barack Obama.
I think that's a piece of it, Brian, much like Brown versus Board of Education was a galvanizing point for white supremacists. The election of Barack Obama was a galvanizing point for white supremacists. So you get the Bill O'Reillys of the world and the Sean Hannitys and whatnot and all these other right-wingers, just going nuts about it. And they're going nuts about it because the white supremacist base, the Fox News base, the right-wing hate radio base, hated Obama.
Yeah, and it's so stressful to me because the Republicans and the right-wing part especially has completely snowed the base and used manipulative tactics such as religion and right to life and all of these things to get them motivated when the people in power, their agenda is completely different from the base, from the agenda of the base.
Oh, I agree. This is the Gillens and Page study that came out of, Columbia University, I think, that found that if you're in the top 1%, the odds of legislation you want passed are like in the 70% region. If you're in the top 10%, it's about 50-50. If you're in the bottom 90%, random noise.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, EcoWine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. We're still in our fundraising drive. That tells you something. You know, back in March of 1978, a friend of mine, Don Hoy, called me from Germany and said, you got to come over and see this thing. In fact, he had already bought my airplane ticket and when he called, and I flew over that night to visit this extraordinary international relief program running out of what was then West Germany in countries all around the world. And they also ran Communities for Abused Kids, which was their central core. And I was so impressed by it that when we came back, well, they hired our ad agency to do a fundraising tour up and down the East Coast with the children's orchestra that they had. And when we came back from that, when we were all done in August, we were sitting at the Kennedy Center with Herr Mueller, the guy who ran the program in Germany, Louise Richards, who was starting a program like it in Maryland, Community for Abused Kids, and Louise and I, and she was bringing our son, who at that point in time was like a month and a half old, and so she, you know, breastfeeding in the Kennedy Center with Meister Rostopovich and Celeste Holm. And Herr Mueller turned to me and said, why don't you do something worthwhile with your life? Why don't you do what I'm doing? Start a Community for Abused Kids. And I turned to Louise and I said, we were running an ad agency and an herbal tea company in Michigan at the time, and I was very unhappy with it. We were making good money, but I was very unhappy. And I said, I'd love to do this. And she says, fine, let's do it. That was in August. In September or October, we had sold one of the businesses and closed the other, and moved to New Hampshire and bought a house and taken in some foster kids and just started the whole program, right? What became the Salem Children's Village, which just closed last year. So it ran for over 30 years, a great run. And what I had to do was go around and raise money. That was my job. Louise put together the program and hired Hal and Shelley Cohen to run it and whatnot. But my job was to raise money. And I went back to Germany in the late fall of '78, and I was complaining to Herr Mueller about raising money. What a difficult thing it is. And, it's humiliating to beg for money and et cetera. And he was like, no, you've got it all wrong. He said, people who help with good works receive a blessing. He said, he was convinced it was a spiritual blessing, but he also pointed out that there was an emotional blessing, knowing that you're part of something that's bigger than you that is doing a good work. And he said, so what you're doing, speaking to me, he said, what you're doing is you're offering people an opportunity to get a blessing. You're not begging for anything. You're offering to give them something that's much bigger, much greater than the little amount of money that they're going to send you. And that really stuck with me all these years. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why, I'm not reluctant to do these fundraisers for Free Speech TV, because there's, at a really deep level, I actually believe that I'm giving you an opportunity to get a blessing. Now, it might just be, like I said, I'm not a spiritual seer, but so it might just be the emotional blessing of being able to say, hey, I'm part of something bigger than me. I'm helping out. But I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to do this. And I hope that you're glad to help. And if you haven't helped already, this is the last day of the fundraiser, come hell or high water, and we're still not at our goal. And that's not a good thing for Free Speech TV. So please call today, 877-378-8669, and make a donation. Thank you. The premium gifts that we have at various giving levels, with a $60 gift, you get a pocket Constitution and the Free Speech TV water bottle, and also the Know Your Rights cards come with the Constitution. With a $120 gift, you get my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle and pocket Constitution. With a $240 gift, you get my book, Rebooting the American Dream, plus my book, What Would Jefferson Do, plus the water bottle and the pocket Constitution. And with a $360 gift, you get the book that Lamar and I spent 17 years writing, Legacy of Secrecy. The major book, you know, it's over 200 pages just of footnotes. I mean, it's a meticulously researched book about the assassination of JFK, plus Rebooting the American Dream book, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle, plus the pocket Constitution. That's with the $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. But the key here is not, you know, what the goodies are, although some of them are kind of cool, especially Legacy of Secrecy. But the key here is that Free Speech TV is, I mean, really good people work in Denver making this network work. I mean, just some genuine people who are wildly underpaid, and some really good talent on this network, and some really important programming. We need to strengthen this, not just help it survive, but strengthen it. Please, whatever you can do to help, please do it today. This is the last day. Thank you. Last hours of
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and super pleased to have in the studio with us, Reverend Barry W. Lynn, the Executive Director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. AU.org is the website. You can tweet him at Barry W. Lynn, L-Y-N-N, or at Americans United. Barry, Reverend, welcome back.
Well, it's nice to be back.
Thank you.
It's nice to be back. There's even a dog walking around the studio.
That's
Look
Blue.
at that.
That's Louise and my, well, Louise is arguably our new dog.
That's good. I like dogs. I'm a dog person.
I like dogs too. I've had dogs since I was born, and cats too. We live a dog and two cats on a little boat down here. And anyway, this is not about us on the boat. Yesterday, the Supreme Court said if a religious institution wants to spread toxic tire waste on their playground for their children, and the federal or the state government is already giving it away or funding, purchases of it for public schools, then they have to give it to churches. So what's wrong with this?
Well, what's wrong with this is the school involved in this case is a direct component of the church, the Trinity Lutheran Church that brought this lawsuit. They had been turned down not because of some federal constitutional principle, but because of a state constitutional principle that is found in roughly 39 state constitutions that's very specific. You cannot give anything of value, not money, not shredded tires, not rubberized playgrounds, to any ministry or mission of any religious entity. And this was a good decision made by many states around the time of the Civil War, and they picked up on it. And now this decision begins to erode the principle that if your state constitution protects against the distribution of money to religious groups, and therefore may violate your conscience, this cuts back on it. Now, there's something called footnote 3. Footnote 3 is one which everyone didn't agree with in this 7-2 decision yesterday, because it said this case is only about giving tires to playgrounds that are parts of church schools.
It sounds like the caveat in Bush v. Gore. This thing stands alone, but it has been cited now 3 times, I believe.
Of course it has, and this will be cited again and again. And in fact, yesterday, they also sent back 2 cases involving similar constitutional provisions. One is a case of ours in Colorado involving school vouchers, and the other is a case in New Mexico involving loaning textbooks to private religious schools. And the decision of the New Mexico Supreme Court was It's in our Constitution. We can't give something like this to religious schools. When you think about it, Tom, it's all about conscience. If you want to give, I want to give money to a charity, I want to give money to a religious charity, we do it. But we don't expect that every taxpayer in the state we live in is planning to have to do the same thing. This is like, it's like a church tax, which of course is abhorrent in the whole history of the United States.
Yeah, this was the huge debate when Massachusetts was to join the Union, and they had a church tax.
They did.
And Madison said, you know, get rid of it if you're going to join the
Absolutely.
And they were very upset about that.
No, they were. Rightly so.
But that's also an argument that right-wingers make.
Yeah.
And sometimes left-wingers make, particularly during the Vietnam era, about, you know, I'm not going to pay my taxes because the money's going to Vietnam, or I'm not going to pay my taxes because the money's going to support an abortion clinic, or I'm not going to pay my taxes because I don't agree with, you know, what Mitch McConnell did last Thursday. Whatever it may be, that argument has been largely eclipsed by the, you know, the public good, and, you know, we do what we do, and, you know, you may not like the Pentagon, but you're going to pay for it. And you know, isn't there a more cogent argument that we can make?
Well, I mean, it's tough because everybody thinks they want to be able to pick where their tax dollars go. But unfortunately, we don't have that system, and we're not about to start one. But this one transcends that. This is a core principle. In America, we treat religion differently. In a few cases, we give it special privilege, special protection. But in most cases, we say you can't promote religion with tax dollars. You can promote anything else. You can promote the love of dogs. We're talking about dogs, or love of this substance I'm drinking from across the street. But you
strange
can't.
Pink stuff.
It is very strange, but there's a backstory to it. Okay. But anyway, but you can't fund religion. That's the one thing that's treated differently, not because of some Supreme Court decision or some kind of liberal justices, but because it's built into the fabric of the First Amendment itself.
Well, and let's take this back, you know, first principles. Jefferson quoting Locke back in I think this was in like the early 1770s, 72, 73, you know, when he was, well, it might have even been before that, when he was a Virginia legislator, basically said, historically, men have been, you know, humans have been conquered and I forget the word that he used, but led, shall we say, by one of three groups: warlords, right, and theocrats, or the rich. And we are setting up a new form of government where none of these three groups will dominate our lives any longer.
Exactly.
We are going to do away with the oligarchs. We are going to do away with the theocrats, and we're going to do away with the warlords. And now we've got, in the warlord department, most of our money is going to the Pentagon. In the theocrat department, we've got the Supreme Court decision yesterday. And in the rich department, we've got, you know, story, GOP donors threaten Congress. No tax cuts, no money.
Right.
You know, it's about a Republican billionaire by the name of Doug Deason, who says to Kevin McCarthy, you know, my checkbook is closed until you guys give me a tax cut.
Oh, man.
And it's like, we have stepped into Thomas Jefferson's worst nightmare. How the hell did we get here?
We got here because we apparently weren't taking enough attention, weren't paying enough attention to what we were doing. And I remember you and I talking on your TV show not too long before the election about the fact that you and I were both fans of Bernie, but unfortunately he didn't get the nomination. And then, frankly, I certainly did, and I think you said you were planning to vote for Hillary.
Yeah,
a lot of people didn't.
I campaigned for Hillary.
I know. Well, I did the same thing. But the point is, a lot of people said, no, she's not perfect either. Well, we've moved well beyond needing somebody that's perfect. We need somebody who's not going to cut health benefits for 22 million people. We're in a stage where we need to take seriously who gets appointed to the Supreme Court. The only good thing that happened yesterday is that Justice Kennedy, who's a conservative but has not lost all of his common sense, did not announce, as in general is the rule, didn't announce he was leaving the court on that last day of the session. He remained silent.
Has it in modern history, Has there ever been anybody left the court without doing it on that last day of one of the sessions?
I think that when Justice O'Connor left, as I recall it, it was later in June when the last session was, but I think over the 4th of July weekend, she let it be known she was leaving.
But she had special circumstances. I mean, her husband was sliding into Alzheimer's really rapidly.
Absolutely. So but that's the only case in modern history that I can remember.
Yeah. So, in other words, odds are we'll have Justice Kennedy for another year.
At least one more term. And I thought, with Neil Gorsuch, his protege, his law clerk, being on the court, he might decide, well, he can retire. But I think that he recognizes, and if you look at Gorsuch's decisions yesterday, a firm supporter of the idea that money can go to churches, he dissented and said they should have stayed the entire immigration order, which is at its root a religious issue. It's taking Muslims and saying, if you're in these 6 countries, we're not letting you in. And if you're a Christian in those countries, come on in. So it has 2 religious components. And then the third thing they did yesterday was take a case called Masterpiece Bakery, which involves a baker in Colorado who refused to bake a cake, not for a wedding of 2 men, but a celebratory event following their marriage in another state. So this wasn't even having to deliver the cake to the wedding ceremony. This was just a party afterwards. Now, this is the same guy that during depositions that were taken by the ACLU in Colorado, this guy said he was asked, did you make any cakes for any other groups? And he said, I did make a cake for a dog wedding once. So apparently this sudden interest in the nobility of weddings, he hadn't lost it during the time he was baking a cake for a dog's wedding.
Yeah. Now, which is bizarre.
No, it is bizarre.
You said that yesterday the Supreme Court rejected basically 2 religious cases, and it sounded like you said that in both those cases, the religious institutions had lost in the lower courts. Did the Supreme Court's rejection of those appeals then mean that those rejections of their demand that they get state money failed? And if so, that seems to contradict this Trinity Lutheran case. Yeah. What does all that mean?
No, I think what it means is they didn't want to do anything that was too broad, too shocking. They wanted to send these cases back with the hope that they would eventually return to the United States Supreme Court, perhaps when someone else was gone, like a Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So we do risk the possibility that this president, who was in fact very different from Hillary Clinton, will now be able to appoint 2 people. If Kennedy leaves, if Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I saw her on the court. Yeah, I mean, he would appoint 3 people. Gorsuch, we know, is at a minimum worse than Justice Scalia was, and he proved that yesterday. And here we are with the possibility of Kennedy leaving in 1 more year. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she looked in pretty good health the last time I saw her do an oral argument, but she can't live forever.
Are we sliding into theocracy?
Well, I think we are. I think we're sliding there. There's a kind of there was no apocalypse yesterday, but
doesn't theocracy typically balance oligarchy? I mean, don't the oligarchs use the theocrats and vice versa?
Oh, of course they do that. And if you look at the amount of money that is spent by the religious right, the big organizations, to promote their agenda, it's just they're in lockstep with some of the wealthiest people in this country, the wealthiest organizations in the country. So church and state at the highest level are already merged. The people who give the most money tend to be the people that are happy to engage in political work right through their churches. Churches aren't supposed to do that, but the president wants to do away with that.
Neo-Calvinism.
Yes, it is.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
The Reverend Barry W. Lynn, Executive Director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, AU.org. Tweet him at Barry W. Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back. And welcome back. Chaz in Lakewood, Washington. Hey, Chaz, what's on your mind today?
Good day, Tom.
Hey, Chaz, thanks for watching Free Speech TV on Roku. What's up?
Well, you know, for all of this bluster about, let's call it alternative facts, and you saw that the New York Times listed an entire page covering Donald Trump's lies. To the best of my knowledge, the only person that's purveying fake news is Donald Trump himself, and I don't know why we're giving him a pass on it.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I printed that story out, and I thought, gee, I should do this on the radio. And then I realized there's like hundreds of things in there. This would take a whole hour just to read.
Yeah, I saw an article. Well, yeah, okay. That was the gist of my point. I know you don't like to have follow-on, so I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. And maybe I'll talk to you next week.
Chaz, thanks a lot for the call. Great to hear from you. Mike in Chicago. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm fine. Thanks for watching Free Speech. What's on your mind, Mike?
Well, I wanted to kind of touch upon a question on the interstate cross-check, which reminds me that while I'm on the air there, I'd like to buy that Curtis beer if I ever come across him, because he got me to thinking about this thing when he brought up the question last week. And it's about due process. And I've kind of been doing some research on that, and when due process basically means one must be given a notice of proceedings before taking away one's liberty and stuff. And I think it can be argued that one's privilege to vote is one's liberty, because they're expressing their what they believe of themselves by voting.
One's privilege to gloat?
No, to vote.
Oh, to vote. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I need to
I'm a little
stick
nervous,
this headphone in this IFB in my ear a little deeper here. So what?
So the question is, if there is a lawsuit, class action, general, or even individually, that can be made against cross-check, I'm wondering if it's illegal, would anybody be able to go to prison, or would it basically just stop the process? And if it is an argument to be made, does it have to be specific to the people denied, or can it be a suit that is brought up on behalf of the people who have been denied voting?
It's a damn good question, Mike, and I don't honestly know the answer. I think that if you could demonstrate that cross-check had a racial or gender bias, then based on the Voting Rights Act, or based on, or arguably the 13th Amendment, and or based on the 19th Amendment that gave women the right to vote, then there could be a case. But if it's just kicking everybody off, since the Supreme Court has ruled that there is no affirmative right to vote in general in the Constitution, although I think that I can find that affirmative right to vote several places in the Constitution, but the Supreme Court disagrees, and they define the law of the land. So my guess is that taking down cross-check is going to have to be done legislatively. And by the way, I believe Congressman Pocan is going to be on the program tomorrow. He's typically on Wednesday at noon and Eastern Time, and he just dropped legislation this week that would stop cross-check. And so I don't want to jump the gun and do a whole rant about it. We'll let him tell us about it tomorrow, assuming that my understanding that it's coming out this week is correct. But I think you're going to start seeing some serious pushback to this, Mike. Thanks for the call.
On April 15th.
Hi, I'm Valerie with Free Speech TV. We're proud to provide you with independent, unfiltered news and documentaries. And as our valued viewer, you can help us continue bringing Free Speech TV well into the future. Join our Pearly Gate Rebels, our planned giving program. Your gift of any size will help ensure democracy endures through an informed citizenry. You can donate property, money, or assets. It's easy. My spouse and I are proud Pearly Gate Rebels. We're doing our part to ensure that Free Speech TV will be here to deliver thought-provoking news and information well into the future. Join us. Call 877-378-8669 or email me at valerie@freespeech.org. Rebel against media owned by billionaires and become one of our pearly gate rebels today.
And wow, what a day, huh? Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind?
I just want to give a shout out to Scott Baker. He's a proponent for public banks, and specifically in cities. And if you could let everybody know about that, Scott Baker, and he has a website, how to start a public bank, and he has a spreadsheet and how to get information on the capital annual financial reports of your city. Seattle is pursuing this. He's pursuing in Oakland. And you could just go to the website of your city and get the capital annual financial report.
Hang on just a second, Jeff. Do state banking charter laws allow cities to incorporate banks?
I believe they do. He's got a whole website showing how they're trying to attempt this. I'm going to go to I'm in San Francisco, as I said, and I'm going to go to the Board of Supervisors and promote this, and I'm going to have all my information and numbers in there, and he lays it all out. How to go to the capital assets page and plug in the numbers. I mean, he even has the Excel sheet that you can use.
Right.
Plug in the numbers, and you could go to your Board of Supervisors and say, hey, we could start a public city bank here using our funds from this, our sub-asset funds.
Right.
And,
you realize who's going to fight the hell out of that?
Oh, I know.
The banksters.
But I think the cat's out of the bag pretty much on these right now that, people have, if they have this information, I just want to throw it out there. I think it's been my pet peeve for a while, and how we could use this money to even invest in cooperative businesses and agricultural. And there's a push in Santa Barbara, I think Santa Cruz, I know Oakland, Seattle's pushing for a public bank.
Wow.
And so
that is great, Jeff. I'm assuming you're familiar with Ellen Brown's work, webadebt.com?
Oh, yeah. Scott Baker is, a student of her. He's one of her babies.
I see.
As I am. I'm going through Web of Debt for the second time, and I'm just kind of making notes on it because it's brilliant. And it just shows how we've been getting screwed for, centuries by banks.
Yep.
The banks from London and such. And, they just run the world, and, how we can fight back with public banking, and how basically in Pennsylvania with Benjamin Franklin, that's what they pretty much ran on. And this scared the banking in London, and they started shutting this down. And
That's interesting. Jeff, I'm going to have to go back and read that. Jeff, we're out of time, but thank you so much for the call. We'll be right back. It's 28 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls, the news of the day, and my thoughts on all of the above right after this break here at the bottom of it.
We're still in our fundraising drive. That tells you something. Back in March of 1978, a friend of mine, Don Hoy, called me from Germany and said, you got to come over and see this thing. In fact, he had already bought my airplane ticket and when he called, and I flew over that night to visit this extraordinary international relief program running out of what was then West Germany in countries all around the world. And they also ran Communities for Abused Kids, which was their central core. And I was so impressed by it that when we came back, they hired our ad agency to do a fundraising tour up and down the East Coast with the children's orchestra that they had. And when we came back from that, when we were all done in August, we were sitting at the Kennedy Center with Herr Mueller, the guy who ran the program in Germany, Louise Richards, who was starting a program like it in Maryland, a community for abused kids, and Louise and I, and she was bringing our son, who at that point in time was like a month and a half old, and so she, you know, breastfeeding in the Kennedy Center with Meister Rostopovich and Celeste Holm. And Herr Mueller turned to me and said, "Why don't you do something worthwhile with your life? Why don't you do what I'm doing? Start a community for abused kids." And I turned to Louise and I said, we were running an ad agency and an herbal tea company in Michigan at the time, and I was very unhappy with it. We were making good money, but I was very unhappy. And I said, "I'd love to do this." And she says, "Fine, let's do it." That was in August. In September or October, we had sold one of the businesses and closed the other, and moved to New Hampshire and bought a house and taken in some foster kids and just started the whole program, right? What became the Salem Children's Village, which just closed last year. So it ran for over 30 years, a great run. And what I had to do was go around and raise money. That was my job. Louise put together the program and hired Hal and Shelley Cohen to run it and whatnot. But my job was to raise money. And I went back to Germany in the late fall of '78, and I was complaining to Herr Mueller about raising money. What a difficult thing it is, and it's humiliating to beg for money, and et cetera. And he was like, no, you've got it all wrong. He said, "You are people who help with good works receive a blessing." He said, he was convinced it was a spiritual blessing, but he also pointed out that there was an emotional blessing, knowing that you're part of something that's bigger than you that is doing a good work. And he said, "So what you're doing," speaking to me, he said, "what you're doing is you're offering people an opportunity to get a blessing. You're not begging for anything. You're offering to give them something that's much bigger, much greater than the little amount of money that they're going to send you." And that really stuck with me all these years. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why, I'm not reluctant to do these fundraisers for Free Speech TV, because there's, at a really deep level, I actually believe that I'm giving you an opportunity to get a blessing. Now, it might just be, like I said, I'm not a spiritual seer, but so it might just be the emotional blessing of being able to say, "Hey, I'm part of something bigger than me. I'm helping out." But I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to do this. And I hope that you're glad to help. And if you haven't helped already, this is the last day of the fundraiser, come hell or high water, and we're still not at our goal. And that's not a good thing for Free Speech TV. So please call today, 877-378-8669, and make a donation. Thank you. The premium gifts that we have at various giving levels, with a $60 gift, you get a pocket Constitution and the Free Speech TV water bottle, and also the Know Your Rights cards come with the Constitution. With a $120 gift, you get my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle and pocket Constitution. With a $240 gift, you get my book, Rebooting the American Dream, plus my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the water bottle and the pocket Constitution. And with a $360 gift, you get the book that Lamar and I spent 17 years writing, Legacy of Secrecy. The major book, it's over 200 pages just of footnotes. I mean, it's a meticulously researched book about the assassination of JFK, plus our Rebooting the American Dream book, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle, plus the pocket Constitution. That's with the $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. But the key here is not, what the goodies are, although some of them are kind of cool, especially Legacy of Secrecy. But the key here is that Free Speech TV is, really good people work in Denver making this network work. Just some genuine people who are wildly underpaid, and some really good talent on this network, and some really important programming. We need to strengthen this, not just help it survive, but strengthen it. Please, whatever you can do to help, please do it today. This is the last day. Thank you.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. This is so insane. 209,000 Americans will die between now and the end of 10 years from now if this Trump Care bill passes. And the Center for the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, says that's going to save Social Security $3 billion that they're not going to have to pay out to those people who died because they didn't have health insurance. And so they thought, well, you know, I can wait on this lump, you know, or that little bit of bleeding it'll go away. I don't need to go to see the doctor. And then, you know, of course, by the time they do get to the doctor, they're in the ER and it's stage 4 and they're dead in 6 months. So 209,000 people will die over the next 10 years, saving Social Security $3 billion. Yes, it's in the CBO score. $3 billion we're going to save in Social Security money. It's a drop in the bucket. You know, it's a penny. I mean, it's a $2.7 trillion Social Security trust fund. We're going to save $3 billion because all these people are going to die. And this is not an abstraction. Odds are that, you know somebody who is now being put at risk by these Republicans who are solely trying to satisfy their billionaire donor base. There's just something so fundamentally wrong with this. It's just so wrong. So anyhow, there's that. There's another interesting story. This is like not apropos of anything political right now, but I just found it absolutely fascinating. It's Inspector Gadget: How Smart Devices Are Outsmarting Criminals. It's in the Guardian. It was in the Guardian yesterday, actually, or last Friday, excuse me, June 23rd, by Rory Carroll, in Los Angeles. And they tell these stories. It starts out, Richard Debat told police a masked intruder assaulted him and killed his wife in their Connecticut home. His wife's Fitbit told another story, and Debat was charged with murder. James Bates said an acquaintance accidentally drowned in his hot tub in Arkansas. Detectives suspected foul play and obtained data from Bates's Amazon Echo device. That's the little speaker that's in your room that's always listening to you. And when you say, hey, not Siri, but whatever it is, hey, Alexa, do something, it says, okay, but it's listening. So they were able to get the records from it, and sure enough, Bates was charged with murder. Ross Compton told investigators he woke up to find his home on fire in Ohio and climbed through a window to escape the flames. Compton's pacemaker suggested otherwise. He was charged with arson and insurance fraud. Yep, they downloaded the information from one guy's pacemaker, from another guy's Amazon Echo, and from another guy's Fitbit. And in every case, it indicated that they actually had committed the crime. The navigation devices can also act as silent witnesses, recording turns, pauses, and stops. The story is really quite remarkable. It's like, if the police want you and you've committed a crime and you've got a smart thermostat in your home, you've got one of these Amazon Echoes or Siri on your cell phone turned on, or any of the interactive voice operated where it's turned on, where if you say, hey, Siri, it automatically wakes up. I do not have that feature turned on. They can be listening to you. It's pretty bizarre. It's in fact very bizarre. Anyhow, Bruce in Clinton, Iowa. Hey, Bruce, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Say, I've heard you speak for the last few years about your concerns about the economy and us being due for a recession. And it seems to me with what's going on with Trump's budget and with his health care bill, that a lot of people aren't going to have any discretionary income if they have any now. And I just don't see how there's going to be anything but a decrease in demand. And don't you see us possibly moving towards a recession?
Yeah, I think we're moving toward a crash. And I think that what's going to feed it is corporate and individual debt. And I think it's probably going to start in China because they are over-leveraged in ways that we could only have dreamed of in 2008. And whether their government, which has much more power than ours does to act quickly and clamp down on things because they don't have to respond to the people or elections or anything like that, whether their government will be able to put an end to that before it spreads worldwide or not is a huge up in the air. But you're right. There was. It's interesting. I had printed this out yesterday, and I don't know what happened to it. I'm going to have to look around. I think sometimes I print stuff and it doesn't get printed out. But there was a fascinating article yesterday indicating that roughly 90% of the economic activity of big corporations in America has been going, or it was more qualified than that. It was more specific than that. But anyhow, it's going to share buybacks, to buying back share, to raise the value of the stocks so that the CEOs could jack up their pay, basically. And so our economy is running like a Ponzi scheme right now based on share buybacks. And that's another huge critical factor that it's like the financialization of the economy. It's like everybody is playing games just to make money using money rather than making money manufacturing products or offering services. And that will come to an end. And when that comes to an end, it's going to be a gruesome thing. So, yeah, I agree with your analysis, Bruce. Bruce, thanks a lot for the call. Randall in Mission, Texas. Hey, Randall, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, I'm a donator to your station. It's my first time, and I want to tell you, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I'm a believer in God. And I was once a Republican, but I am no more.
Okay.
Because of what I see, they dangle carrots out in front of these elderly people and just scare them to death. My mother lost all of her savings to these Republicans that would call her up time and time again, and she lost all of her savings. And cut it short here, I just wanted to call and tell you about what years ago when President Nixon was a vice president, he got in an argument with Khrushchev. And Khrushchev, I can't say it verbatim or what exactly what he said, but he come across saying that America will fall one day, and you won't even have to fight over it.
Yeah, Khrushchev's exact phrase was, "We will bury you." Although he was speaking about economics, the John Birch Society took it out of context. But in any case, yeah, that was at the World's Fair, wasn't it? When Khrushchev pulled his shoe out and started banging the counter.
Yeah. But I am a staunch believer in God, and but I also believe in the separation of church and state.
Yeah.
And I believe that is, if churches are going to get involved, they need to be taxed.
No, I absolutely agree, Randall. And this was an interesting and running debate between Jefferson and Madison from around 1787 to around 1790 in their letters. It was just fascinating to read. Jefferson actually thought that there should be a law that said that priests and ministers could not run for political office. He was afraid that if the religious took over government, that they would turn us into a theocracy. Madison thought the American people would never be stupid enough to vote for a priest or a minister for political office. But he was afraid that if government gave money to churches, that it would corrupt the churches. Madison was a good Presbyterian, and he was very concerned about his own church being corrupted by federal funds. So they both agreed that there should be no mingling of government and religion. But Madison wanted to do it to protect the church, and Jefferson wanted to do it to protect the government. And Jefferson thought the biggest threat were religious zealots out there trying to preaching politics. And Madison was concerned that the biggest threat out there was, political zealots contaminating religion. And it turns out, sadly, they were both right. I mean, this is where we're at. We've got, churches polluting our political discourse, as we saw in the Supreme Court yesterday. And we've got politicians now buying favor with mega churches in order to get the votes of their thousands of parishioners, in exchange for, 1,000 points of light. George Herbert Walker Bush's scheme to pass money along to Jerry Falwell and friends. So, it's not a good spot we're in, Randall, but spot on. I'm with you. Thank you so much for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to check in with more of your calls in a minute, and also we'll be checking in with Talk Media News. In fact, I think Bob Ney is going to be with us today. Stick around. Welcome back. What was United Nations, Louise? Cruise ship. Oh, was it the UN? Okay, thank you. All right, somebody called and corrected me. That's great. I mean, we've got the smartest listeners on earth here. That was, so thank you. Mike in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hi. My wife and I were in Ireland back in September, and we got a couple of books. One about the Easter Rising, and a book that I'm reading right now, A Short History of Ireland's Famine.
Right.
Well, and I was reading this thing, and it just struck me how what they were doing back in 1845 through 1847. One of the things that they felt was, the Irish were just lazy, and so if we help them, they'll just depend on government handouts. But if we don't, they'll get off of their butts and they'll find a job. Right. And these guys believed. I'll just read this real quick. Believe the state should play a minimal role in regulating the economy on the grounds that it inhibited private enterprise and ultimately weakened the country. Robert Peel was the prime minister at the time. He ordered 2 large shipments of corn from the U.S. and a guy, one was delivered, and a guy by the name of, I think it's Trevelyan, canceled the next one because the Irish, they didn't need help. They could get off of their butts and go to work. At the same time that Irish produce was being sent to Britain and to the rest of the world.
Yeah, the big takeaway on the potato famine is that during that period from 1845, really right up until around 1850, that Ireland was exporting to England more food than they needed to feed the Irish. And yet 1 million people died of famine in Ireland because they were not allowed to eat the food that they grew for the British.
Exactly. And by sending this food out and not feeding the people that actually needed it, that helped the upper classes make more money.
Right.
And you understand between, when we were there in September, you get a real feeling that the Irish are still sore about this.
Oh yeah, and with good reason.
Between that and the Easter Rising.
Yeah, and with good reason, absolutely. And
it just
go ahead.
And it just kind of raised the hair on the back of my neck that what they were doing in, as I said, 1845 through 7 is basically the same thing that's happening here.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is what happens when you get capitalism run amok, and you have a neo-Calvinistic rationale system for it that says people are fundamentally evil and lazy, and if you don't beat them upside the head, they're not ever going to do anything. And therefore, don't give them Medicaid, don't give them Medicare, don't give them food stamps, don't subsidize their housing, don't give them free education, don't even give them a damn public school. Let them go out and earn it for themselves and pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And occasionally you get somebody who can actually pull that off, and they then become the heroes, the icons of the whole thing. Mike, thanks for the call. Well said. Welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by GoatsForTheOldGoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. On the line with us, Patrick Gavin with Talk Media News. Hey, Patrick.
Hey, how you doing?
Great. What's up?
Obviously, healthcare. I thought I'd give a little bit of an update of how things are looking.
You mean tax cuts?
That's another way of putting it. That's absolutely right.
Well, if you take away healthcare from 22 million people and you give a tax cut, a $600 billion tax cut to, a couple tens of thousands of people, I would call that a tax cut bill, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way. I mean, there's no way to really deny what the end result is, at the very least, which is benefits going to wealthier Americans and obviously poor Americans kind of getting the shaft. I mean, even if the Republicans didn't set out to do that in their hearts, there's really no way to sort of fudge the numbers on that. So yeah, no,
I think the most underreported part of the CBO score, I don't know if you read it, but in the CBO report they talk about how the Republican so-called health care bill, the Trump care, is going to actually increase the viability of Social Security over a 10-year period by $3 billion. So how is it that this legislation helps strengthen Social Security to the tune of $3 billion over 10 years? It turns out it's because they're expecting 209,000 people to die early, prematurely, because of lack of health care.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that is somewhere between pathetic and evil.
Yeah. And I think that this is why this bill has just never really had a great amount of public support. I think also it's a big reason why, they're trying to, two things. It's a big reason why they largely crafted it in secret, and it's also a big reason why they really want to get this done before July 4th. I mean, this thing is always, on a good day was 20% popular. Right. The second these senators go back home, by the way, after a CBO score that essentially parallels the House bill, which the Senate said was dead on arrival, which the president himself said was too mean. I mean, the Senate, trash talked the House bill, and the CBO score, it's a little bit more generous. It's 22 million more.
But see, that CBO score only goes out 10 years, and the major cuts in the Senate bill happen at 11 and 12 and 13 years.
Yeah, right.
So it's even worse. It's just that they're hiding
it. I think because of that, they know that if they send the Republican caucus back home for this July 4th recess, I mean, it's just not going to get any better. And so I think that's why they just want to pull this thing off. But, I think it's interesting. I mean, I kind of always was under the assumption that Mitch McConnell just wanted to get this done with to get it done with, that his heart wasn't in it, et cetera, et cetera. But, now we're hearing reports that, Mitch McConnell has, warned members of his party that, there will be a price to pay for any no votes. I mean, the latest whip count that we're looking at is 6 no, 20 undecided, 17 yes or leaning yes. Rand Paul, they just announced, is going to meet with Trump this afternoon, which is interesting. I mean, I don't see, there's no harm in it from, I think, Trump's perspective. But Rand Paul, I think, as people have always thought, was one of the more entrenched no's out of the entire group. I think Trump might have a better chance picking up a Ted Cruz or someone like that than Rand Paul.
Well, here's the other thing that came out of the CBO score was that this is going to decrease the budget deficit by about $188 billion, and which means that in order to keep it in compliance with reconciliation rules, they can take that number all the way down to zero. So that means that Mitch McConnell now has $188 billion in federal money that he can use to pass out to those no-vote senators. Say, Rob Portman, oh, you're worried about the impact it's going to have on drug addiction in Ohio? No problem. Here's $2 billion just for your drug program.
Yeah, right.
And so he's going to start buying votes.
I mean, you recall the Cornhusker kickback from, I'm not quite sure what year that was, but
yeah, it was 2009. It was the same thing with Obamacare. There were sweeteners in there to get people to go along.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting too, because I mean, if there was a silver lining for Republicans in that CBO score, it was the deficit reduction. But that appeals to people who are already supporting this bill, and it doesn't. It appeals to the conservative deficit hawks, and those people are not who Mitch McConnell needs to hook. He needs more moderate Republicans. So in a way, it was almost too bad that it had these great deficit reductions, because that just wasn't the constituency that Mitch McConnell was going to. And by the way, I mean, all of this is just the vote to proceed. I mean, this isn't even debating the bill. And if they can't get 50 votes just to proceed, then gosh, I mean, it seems really unlikely that they're going to have the votes to.
Are they going to hold the vote today on the motion to proceed?
It's either today or tomorrow, and the hope is that they get it done by that they have a final vote by Friday.
Right.
But honestly, and I'm blanking on. There's been at least 2 Republican senators in the past 24 hours who they themselves are like, look, let's slow the horses, let's get this done, and that of course makes total sense, rationally.
Yeah, Collins and Johnson, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but it makes no sense politically. I mean, the longer they let this drag out for the Republicans, I think the worse things are going to look. So it's going to be a really interesting 48 hours to see what comes out of this. There's obviously some major arm neck twisting happening right now, but I mean, so far I'd say it's not looking great.
Yeah. Oh, that's good news for me. So what else is going on, Patrick?
Well, a lot of folks are trying to make sense of the news yesterday about the travel ban and Supreme Court sort of allowing, a more kind of a softer version of that ban. I mean, Trump took to Twitter and really claimed victory, and it wasn't a horrible day for him on that regard. It certainly could have gone worse, but it's not that they allowed his travel ban, just sort of allowed for a kind of softer version until the court has a chance to properly hear the case. So for now, in terms of affecting Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen, it is a softer version of the ban, but it just, even reading their decision, the good news for Trump is that it does seem as if the Supreme Court was far more, not deferent, but far more respectful, I guess, of Trump's executive authority than some of these lower courts. But even Clarence Thomas, expressed a lot of concerns about how you would actually pull this off. And even in the best case scenario for Trump, which is the softer version, the softer version says you can travel if you have, quote unquote, a bona fide relationship with someone here in the United States, which of course means now we have to define what does a bona fide relationship mean. So it certainly could have been a worse day for Trump on this particular issue, but I think it's a little generous to say that this was.
I'm wondering where the Supreme Court got the legal authority to invent law.
Yes, it's a good question.
I mean, it's not in the Constitution that they can say, "Oh, yeah, this you can put this law into effect if you modify it the way that we specify." The amendment process is an Article 1 process, not an Article 3 process. It's specific to the Congress. It's not for the Supreme Court. It's like this, just like Citizens United and just like Roe v. Wade. This is the United States Supreme Court making law out of thin air, and there's no authority for that in the Constitution. But anyhow, that's just my pet peeve.
And there's an irony in the fact that it's being led by a conservative court, right?
Yeah, a supposedly conservative court. I think conservative these days increasingly just means, shilling for the right-wing billionaires. But I get it.
Well, last end, I know you got to go. In terms of Trump himself, there's a new Pew Research Center survey out that covered 37 nations, and it showed that, in fact, that probably not to the surprise of many, but that Trump has really hurt the reputation of the United States around the country, with just 22% out of those 37 nations saying that they have confidence in Trump to do the right thing when it comes to international affairs. That's down from 64 under Obama. So not great news for us.
Yeah, I saw that report. I think it was in the Washington Post. They had a graphic of it, and wow, we went from like 90% approval to 10% approval in a bunch of countries.
Yeah.
I mean, it was scary. Patrick Gavin, Talk Media News. Thank you, Patrick.
Take care.
Great talking with you. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
From New York,
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeats.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. We're still on our fundraising drive. That tells you something. You know, back in March of 1978, a friend of mine, Don Hoy, called me from Germany and said, you got to come over and see this thing. In fact, he had already bought my airplane ticket and when he called, and I flew over that night to visit this extraordinary international relief program running out of what was then West Germany in countries all around the world. And they also ran Communities for Abused Kids, which was their central core. And I was so impressed by it that when we came back, well, they hired our ad agency to do a fundraising tour up and down the East Coast with the children's orchestra that they had. And when we came back from that, when we were all done in August, we were sitting at the Kennedy Center with Herr Mueller, the guy who ran the program in Germany, Louise Richards, who was starting a program like it in Maryland, a Community for Abused Kids, and Louise and I, and she was bringing our son, who at that point in time was like a month and a half old, and so she, you know, breastfeeding in the Kennedy Center with Meister Rostopovich and Celeste Holm. And Herr Mueller turned to me and said, why don't you do something worthwhile with your life? Why don't you do what I'm doing? Start a Community for Abused Kids. And I turned to Louise and I said, we were running an ad agency and an herbal tea company in Michigan at the time, and I was very unhappy with it. We were making good money, but I was very unhappy. And I said, I'd love to do this. And she says, fine, let's do it. That was in August. In September or October, we had sold one of the businesses and closed the other, and moved to New Hampshire and bought a house and taken in some foster kids and just started the whole program, right? What became the Salem Children's Village, which just closed last year. So it ran for over 30 years, a great run. And what I had to do was go around and raise money. That was my job. Louise put together the program and hired Hal and Shelley Cohen to run it and whatnot. But my job was to raise money. And I went back to Germany in the late fall of '78, and I was complaining to Herr Mueller about raising money. What a difficult thing it is, and it's humiliating to beg for money, and et cetera. And he was like, no, you've got it all wrong. He said, you are people who help with good works receive a blessing. He said, he was convinced it was a spiritual blessing, but he also pointed out that there was an emotional blessing, knowing that you're part of something that's bigger than you that is doing a good work. And he said, so what you're doing, speaking to me, he said, what you're doing is you're offering people an opportunity to get a blessing. You're not begging for anything. You're offering to give them something that's much bigger, much greater than the little amount of money that they're going to send you. And that really stuck with me all these years. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why, I'm not reluctant to do these fundraisers for Free Speech TV, because there's, at a really deep level, I actually believe that I'm giving you an opportunity to get a blessing. Now, it might just be, like I said, I'm not a spiritual seer, but so it might just be the emotional blessing of being able to say, hey, I'm part of something bigger than me. I'm helping out. But I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to do this. And I hope that you're glad to help. And if you haven't helped already, this is the last day of the fundraiser, come hell or high water, and we're still not at our goal. And that's not a good thing for Free Speech TV. So please call today, 877-378-8669, and make a donation. Thank you. The premium gifts that we have at various giving levels, with a $60 gift, you get a pocket Constitution. And the Free Speech TV water bottle and also the Know Your Rights cards come with the Constitution. With a $120 gift, you get my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle and pocket Constitution. With a $240 gift, you get my book, Rebooting the American Dream, plus my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the water bottle and the pocket Constitution. And with a $360 gift, you get the book that Lamar and I spent 17 years writing, Legacy of Secrecy. The major book, you know, it's over 200 pages just of footnotes. I mean, it's a meticulously researched book about the assassination of JFK, plus our Rebooting the American Dream book, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle, plus the pocket Constitution. That's with the $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. But the key here is not, you know, what the goodies are, although some of them are kind of cool, especially Legacy of Secrecy. But the key here is that Free Speech TV is, I mean, really good people work in Denver making this network work. I mean, just some genuine people who are wildly underpaid, and some really good talent on this network, and some really important programming. We need to strengthen this, not just help it survive, but strengthen it. Please, whatever you can do to help, please do it today. This is the last day. Thank you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us, I believe, yeah, there he is Richard Manning, president of Americans for Limited Government. Manning worked with President Trump on trade issues during Trump's campaign, currently serves on Trump's transition team in the Labor Department. The website for Americans for Limited Government is getliberty.org, and you can tweet Richard Manning at LimitGovT or rmanning957. Richard, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Good talking with you. So, you know, I've been on your website and I've seen your stuff and you know, looked at your funding and all this other stuff, and it seems to me that the principal focus of what you're doing is to reduce the size of government. Do I have that right?
That's absolutely. Our name kind of defines us, and we're looking at, you know, waste, less fraud, but waste and abuse. And, you know, when you get down to it, Tom, there's a lot of places where limiting the size and scope of government is it really just makes sense. Places where government is perhaps interjecting itself into places where it shouldn't be if it's not constitutionally, and in doing so, they're harming the economic growth and hope and prosperity of American citizens.
If Franklin Roosevelt was right, and the only force that can hold back bad behavior on the part of billionaires and giant corporations is government, then aren't you simply arguing that your funders, the billionaires, the Kochs and whatnot, should just be running everything?
Well, first, I don't get money from the Kochs. If they want to send me some, I'd be grateful. But
I looked it up at secrets.org. It said that your Americans for Limited Government have been funded by a small group of very, very wealthy people for a number of years. I don't have the last year's numbers.
Yeah, I would be more than welcome for you to look at our 990s, and you'll see that that's true.
Well, whatever. We're talking ideology here. I didn't mean that as an ad hominem attack, and if it came across that way, I apologize.
That's fine. You know, actually, we spent a lot of time talking about corporate cronyism, and while FDR may have been correct in his overall tone, in some respects, what we have today is a system where the wealthy work with government, work within government, work to manipulate government to create the outcomes that they want against their competitors. And so what we really end up with out of this system is the administrative state is working hand in glove with those who have the power and wealth to be able to manipulate it to the detriment of the rest of us. And that's why when you take a look at trade deals, you take a look at the tax code, you take a look at a lot of the different elements of government, what you see is the outcomes are less about what is in the best interest of the public or even the voters who elected the politicians on either side of the aisle, but more in terms of what's in the interests of those factions, as your previous section said, factions of influencers who are able to drive government to their own ends.
So let me get this right. Your argument is that rich people with a specific agenda, let's say, petro billionaires, are corrupting government by giving large sums of money to politicians to, for example, deny climate change, or to give them tax breaks by, cutting health care for millions of people. And that corruption of government is a legitimate reason to destroy the government, or to minimize the size and power of the government, which then further enhances the power and wealth of the billionaires who corrupted the government. I don't hear a solution from you to this problem.
I'll give you the solution. It's pretty simple. It's called freedom. What we have in essence is, excuse me, and I'm going to restate because I don't agree with kind of your logic of what you just went through. We have a system, an administrative state system that is gamed. It's gamed in favor of the people who are kind of fighting over the resources. And whether or not they are on the left or the right is equally gamed. During the Obama administration, billions of dollars were funneled into left-wing groups through various things like settlements. The settlements with the mortgage companies created billions of dollars of windfall into left-wing groups.
You mean you're talking about reparations for people who got screwed by the banks?
Except for the money didn't go to the people. It went to organizations that were then supposed to represent the people, but it didn't go to the people. A large bunch of money went to the...
So, again, I'm not hearing a solution here. Isn't the solution to get money out of politics, to block the ability of the Koch brothers and the Mercers and these other right-wing billionaires from corrupting our politicians?
Well, getting money out of politics is not going to happen, But what needs to happen...
Why not just go back to the laws that were passed in 1973 after the Nixon scandals that got knocked down by the Supreme Court in '76 in the Buckley case? Why not pass a constitutional amendment that says that money is not free speech under the First Amendment of the Constitution, and corporations are not people, and then just dial this stuff back, and then you won't have left-wing or right-wing corruption of government, and government can be a countervailing force against, the billionaires who are, frankly, destroying our country and our planet.
Well, first of all, I agree with none of your premise, but having said that, I'll give you the answer. The answer in terms of the money in politics is that there will always be money in politics. There will always be influencers in politics.
There's always going to be trying to rob banks, but that doesn't mean we do away with the laws against bank robbery.
Tom, we just, it's my turn. So if you have money in politics, it's always going to exist. The counterweight.
Richard, that is not an argument. Saying an evil exists and therefore we're going to do nothing about it is not an argument. That's the opposite of an argument.
Didn't say you wouldn't do anything about it. What I said was that that money is in politics regardless. And if you sit there and you say that your private individuals or even corporations can't defend their interests from an avaricious government, you don't in fact protect the democracy. You don't in fact protect speech.
So your worldview is that we the people, this government that George Washington got 3 horses shot out from underneath him to start, that our government is fundamentally an evil. It's avaricious was your word.
I think
our government is greedy.
I think at this juncture in history, it is fair to say that the administrative state is self-serving and it is self-perpetuating.
And you don't think that's true of giant corporations and avaricious billionaires?
Well, you know what happens with giant corporations when people don't like what they're doing? They don't buy their stuff.
No, what happens is those companies buy up all the medium and small-sized companies, so people have no choice. So Walmart moves into a rural town, and on average, 110 companies, mostly retail businesses, go out of business. That's what happens.
So the answer that you're looking for, I'm not going to give you the answer you're looking for. I will give you the answer that's actually true. You have power. Power is more power the government has, the more they desire to influence the government what it does.
So you want to strip power away from we the people?
If you don't strip power away from the government isn't we the people. The government, we the people.
Well, it might be if the billionaires couldn't buy it.
Wrong, Tom. You're completely wrong. The government. Here's what the government is. The government isn't we the people. The government is is an exercise of power against the people.
You just said that the government is in thrall, is captured by these corporations and these billionaires who have personal agendas. They've got their factions. They have self-interest. If it's been captured by them, let's uncapture it.
Yes, and the way to do that is to cut the bind.
Is to destroy it?
Well, destroy is too strong. Because we're limited government, not no government. The answer is...
You want to limit it just to the point where it can't stop the billionaires?
No, I want to limit it to the point where people are able to make decisions on their own. People are not having their electricity grid limited down to where it's not growing, so growth potential in the country doesn't exist. That's the kind of things I want to do. I want to make it so if a president sits there and wants to do regulatory reform without having any kind of congressional input, they're limited in what they can do. They can't just take a pen and a phone and undo most of the.
But at the end of the day, Richard, I hear your arguments, and and you've heard mine, and we both think that the other is spouting nonsense.
But I don't think you're spouting nonsense.
But shouldn't we, the people, have some influence? I mean, Gillens and Page did this study out of Columbia University 3 years ago, where they found that if you're in the top 1% of Americans economically, what you want passed legislatively is in the probability of it happening runs from 60 to 80%. If you're in the top 10% of the United States economically, the probability of what you want passed legislatively is well over 50%. If you're in the bottom 90%, the probability of something being passed through Congress that meets your desires, and this is a fairly exhaustive study, is equivalent to random noise. The bottom 90% of America is not represented because the billionaire class, the people that you're defending here, and these giant corporations have completely crowded us out of government since the Supreme Court ruled that money is equivalent to free speech. Why not just blow that up? Why not pass a constitutional amendment that says, no, money is not free speech? From the George Washington administration until 1976 with the Buckley case, giving money to politicians was considered a behavior that could be regulated, and it was aggressively regulated, particularly after the Nixon scandals. The Supreme Court blew that up. A bunch of right-wingers on the Supreme Court dancing to the tune. You had Alito and Scalia hanging out with, Thomas and Scalia hanging out with the Koch brothers at their retreats, and then going back and making these kind of decisions. Why not just get the money out of politics? Limit individual contributions to $2,700. Limit campaigns to 3 months like they do in the UK. I mean, there's 100 different ways to get money out of politics.
Well, I think that one of the best ways to get money out of politics is to have a campaign like the Ellis campaign in Georgia, where the Democrats discovered they blew $30 million on a candidate who didn't even live in the district. That's one great way to get money out of politics, is when the people are giving the money discover they're being ripped off by the consultants.
Oh, come on, Richard. That's the most cynical thing I've ever heard.
No, it's going down the line you're going down, and since you started the pathway, we're going to go down that pathway. Here's what we have in terms of money in politics, and it's really very simple. You have corporations, in order to defend themselves, because you have a government that is so powerful they can choose winners and losers. They have to participate in order to defend themselves. I am not going to apologize for that. What I am going to say is we need to rip that power away from those administrative states, so businesses don't have to defend themselves, so we can empty cases.
The poor businesses. I get it. Richard, we're out of time, but
I'm all about.
You've got the last word. You got the last word. Richard Manning, Americans for Limited Government.
Is the Thom Hartmann Program.
GetLiberty.org is the website. You can check it out. You can tweet him at rmanning957 or at LimitGovT. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And I never did find the batteries for my... Let's see here. Robert in Tyler, Texas. Hey, Robert, what's up?
Beacon of sense.
I beg your pardon. Start again, Robert. I'm sorry. We missed the very beginning of what you said.
Thank you for being a beacon for sensibility.
Oh, you're welcome. So what's up?
What do you think about the idea that part of this thing is to break up the nurses' union by cutting down hospitals and all that all over the country, trying to disrupt them? Aren't they one of the biggest unions?
They are. They're not a particularly powerful union, though, because the way that healthcare in this country is done is so scattered and so across so many different venues that and most of them now we've got I think most of the states in the United States now, or the majority of them, are right to work for less states. So there's some considerable power that can be used to beat up the nurses or any other union. But I guarantee it's not a union that is jacking up healthcare costs.
No, I wasn't saying that. I was saying the opposite of that. That's what the Republicans are trying to do, is disrupt that organization.
Right. Well, no doubt, Republicans hate unions. That's very simple. Unions represent working people. Republicans represent billionaires and corporations.
Do you remember a radio guy back in the mid-'70s called Earl Nightingale?
Yeah, I do.
You remind me of him, but he had little 5-minute.
Yeah, I used to actually have a collection of tapes of Earl Nightingale. He did a lot of.
Go down and they used to give the little paper print away every day. They did it 5 days a week. I think it went on for several years that I remember getting it.
Yeah.
And I had a whole collection of them, but I lost them.
Yeah. I had a collection of Earl Nightingale tapes too when I was late teens, early 20s, I think, or in my early 20s when I was starting in business, because it's some pretty good self-help stuff.
Mid-'70s. Yeah. Well, thank you for all you do for the planet and humanity.
Great. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate your kind words. I got to move along real quick because I just have a minute left here. Robert, thank you for the call. John in Pearland, Texas. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Hello, Tom. I got a quick question. I know you don't have a lot of time left. A lot of federal lawmakers, they don't seem to be too concerned at all about good quality health care for everyone. What kind of sweet deal do they have available to themselves?
The members of the House and the Senate are required by law to be on the Obamacare exchange. And the Obamacare exchange here in Washington, D.C. works really well. In fact, all of our employees are on the Obamacare exchange. Louise is on the Obamacare exchange. I'm on Medicare. And so, presumably that'll change with this so-called repeal of Obamacare. But that's, what they've got right now is just a good, decent health insurance policy, courtesy of Obamacare.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering what's going on here. But
yeah, the Republicans forced that. That was, because when they were doing Obamacare, they actually had open hearings and they actually allowed Republicans to make amendments. That was one of the amendments that the Republicans said, you have to do this if you're going to get our votes. And so they went along with it, and they put it in there saying all members of Congress have to suffer under the miseries of Obamacare. And then the Republicans didn't give them their vote anyway. They just lied. John, thanks for the call. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Joe in Seattle. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good.
I just want to let you know I stumbled on your show a few months ago. I really enjoyed the debate and dialogue. It's very intelligently thought out, great perspective, and highlighted by the fact that the libertarian gentleman that you just had on, that you guys went round and round, you were respectful, you weren't condescending, and you even plugged his website and his organization at the end of it all. And that's what we need more of in this country is intelligent discourse, respectful discourse, and I think you do it better than anybody out there. And I'm glad I stumbled on your show, and please keep doing what you're doing.
Okay. Joe, thank you. That was a very kind call. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and welcome. Welcome to our program. I'm glad you found us. Rich in Greenwood, Indiana. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I'll tell you, Mr. Manning is full of beans. I just don't understand. As he went through that whole litany of things that he thought ought to be, how he missed the idea of auditing the Pentagon's black budgets.
Right.
And acknowledging that simply reining it in and pulling back on the automation that permits the waste, fraud, and abuse is an obvious huge target of his argument.
But here's the thing, Rich, and once you get this, everything falls into place. First of all, starting premise. Republicans are out for the billionaires and the corporations. The billionaires and the corporations are out for the Republicans. The Democrats, by and large, are out for working people and people who have been, at the margins of society, and those people are generally out for the Democrats. So when government programs give money to the people, they are helping the constituents of the Democrats. When government programs give money to corporations, they are helping the constituents of the Republicans. Most of the Department of Defense budget is going not to people, and what little does, military pay sucks. What little does is pretty poor. Most of it is going to giant corporations. There's a ring road around Washington, D.C. and up in Virginia here, where you've got, miles of neighborhoods with 10 and 20 bedroom houses with servants' quarters next to them. They're all defense contractors. So, in fact, the suburb directly north of Washington, D.C. has now eclipsed 90210, the old Beverly Hills zip code, as the wealthiest zip code in the United States. All that wealth, all those millionaires, and is coming from the Department of Defense. So you're never going to hear a conservative attack the Department of Defense, because the Department of Defense is shoveling money like a guy at the back of a coal steam engine, shoveling it into the fire. He's just shoveling money out to the billionaire class and the corporations that represent them. That's why. Rich, thanks for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around.
We're still in our fundraising drive. That tells you something. Back in March of 1978, a friend of mine, Don Hoy, called me from Germany and said, you got to come over and see this thing. In fact, he had already bought my airplane ticket and when he called, and I flew over that night to visit this extraordinary international relief program running out of what was then West Germany in countries all around the world. And they also ran Communities for Abused Kids, which was their central core. And I was so impressed by it that when we came back, they hired our ad agency to do a fundraising tour up and down the East Coast with the children's orchestra that they had. And when we came back from that, when we were all done in August, we were sitting at the Kennedy Center with Herr Mueller, the guy who ran the program in Germany, Louise Richards, who was starting a program like it in Maryland, Community for Abused Kids, and Louise and I, and she was bringing our son, who at that point in time was like a month and a half old, and so she, breastfeeding in the Kennedy Center with Meister Rostopovich and Celeste Holm. And Herr Mueller turned to me and said, why don't you do something worthwhile with your life? Why don't you do what I'm doing? Start a Community for Abused Kids. And I turned to Louise and I said, we were running an ad agency and an herbal tea company in Michigan at the time, and I was very unhappy with it. We were making good money, but I was very unhappy. And I said, I'd love to do this. And she says, fine, let's do it. That was in August. In September or October, we had sold one of the businesses and closed the other, and moved to New Hampshire and bought a house and taken in some foster kids and just started the whole program, right? What became the Salem Children's Village, which just closed last year. So it ran for over 30 years, a great run. And what I had to do was go around and raise money. That was my job. Louise put together the program and hired Hal and Shelley Cohen to run it and whatnot. But my job was to raise money. And I went back to Germany in the late fall of '78. And I was complaining to Herr Mueller about raising money. What a difficult thing it is. And, it's humiliating to beg for money and et cetera. And he was like, no, you've got it all wrong. He said, you are people who help with good works receive a blessing. He said, he was convinced it was a spiritual blessing, but he also pointed out that there was an emotional blessing, knowing that you're part of something that's bigger than you that is doing a good work. And he said, so what you're doing, speaking to me, he said, what you're doing is you're offering people an opportunity to get a blessing. You're not begging for anything. You're offering to give them something that's much bigger, much greater than the little amount of money that they're going to send you. And that really stuck with me all these years. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why, I'm not reluctant to do these fundraisers for Free Speech TV, because there's, at a really deep level, I actually believe that I'm giving you an opportunity to get a blessing. Now, it might just be, like I said, I'm not a spiritual seer, but so it might just be the emotional blessing of being able to say, hey, I'm part of something bigger than me. I'm helping out. But I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to do this. And I hope that you're glad to help. And if you haven't helped already, this is the last day of the fundraiser, come hell or high water, and we're still not at our goal. And that's not a good thing for Free Speech TV. So please call today, 877-378-8669, and make a donation. Thank you. The premium gifts that we have at various giving levels, with a $60 gift, you get a pocket Constitution and the Free Speech TV water bottle, and also the Know Your Rights cards come with the Constitution. With a $120 gift, you get my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle and pocket Constitution. With a $240 gift, you get my book, Rebooting the American Dream, plus my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the water bottle and the pocket Constitution. And with a $360 gift, you get the book that Lamar and I spent 17 years writing, Legacy of Secrecy. The major book, it's over 200 pages, just of footnotes. I mean, it's a meticulously researched book about the assassination of JFK, plus Rebooting the American Dream book, plus the Free Speech TV water bottle, plus the pocket Constitution. That's with the $360 gift. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. But the key here is not, what the goodies are, although some of them are kind of cool, especially Legacy of Secrecy. But the key here is that Free Speech TV is, really good people work in Denver making this network work. Just some genuine people who are wildly underpaid, and some really good talent on this network, and some really important programming. We need to strengthen this, not just help it survive, but strengthen it. Please, whatever you can do to help, please do it today. This is the last day. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Interesting news. Mitch McConnell has decided he's going to wait until after this week to have his vote on his his giant $600 billion tax cut for the Koch brothers and their friends and compatriots. I would like to make a prediction. You know, when Ronald Reagan wanted to raise the retirement age for Social Security from 65 to 67, he knew, and this was back in the 80s, he knew that if he simply did it, he probably wouldn't get reelected, and it would probably hurt Republicans really badly. So they wrote it into the bill, into the legislation, raising the retirement age to 67, but they pushed it out 30 years. So if you're retiring this year, if you were born in 1952, I guess that would be, you can't retire at 65. You have to have been born in 1951. You can retire at 66. And I think if you were born in like I can't do the math in my head fast enough. But anyhow, it's going to go to 67 in the next couple of years. So we're now, just now, getting those cutbacks in Social Security that Reagan put. I mean, you know, there were some that he put into the program at the time. For example, making Social Security benefits taxable, and you know, that kind of stuff. But that's how he did it. And I predict Mitch McConnell's going to do the same thing. Now, he doesn't have to push it out 30 years. He only has to push it out 11 years. Because when the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, scores a piece of legislation, they only look at 10-year impact. And because legislation passed by reconciliation can only last for 10 years and then has to be renewed, that's, you know, part of the rationale. And this is being passed by reconciliation. So it's only a 10-year bill. So what McConnell, I predict, will do, and we'll see. I may well be wrong on this, but I'm willing, you know, well, I don't bet, but, you know, if I did, I would bet money that what McConnell's going to do is he's going to take the majority of these cuts and the majority of the dead people, the 209,000 dead people we'll have over the next 10 years that will save Social Security $3 billion because it won't have to pay benefits. He's going to take that stuff and he's going to move it out beyond 2026. So it's more than 10 years from now. And the billionaires are just going to have to wait a little while for their tax cuts, or for at least many of their tax cuts. Maybe he'll even do deficit spending for a while to get there. Who knows? But that's my prediction. We'll see where it goes. Just got an email from Legit PAC. The elections are almost a year and a half away, but dark money attack groups are already targeting even more of our champions in the Senate. One super PAC just started running ads attacking Senator Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts, and the groups that spent $64 million to defeat Senator Sherrod Brown in Ohio last time have announced that they're planning to surpass that figure this time. If Elizabeth Warren and Sherrod Brown file financial disclosure showing high levels of grassroots support, they can make a strong claim to voters that they are the legitimate options in the race. And so they're basically encouraging people to go to Elizabeth Warren's site and Sherrod Brown's site and make a donation. Remarkable. Because the billionaires are coming after our people. Isn't it incredible where we're at? Rich in Central Woolley, Washington. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind?
Well, Tom, you mentioned that the health care bill may make it easier for businesses to drop health insurance for their employees. Now, many medium to large-sized companies have their own reserve fund for their health insurance and are merely administered through a health insurance company. My concern is that there may be a simple two-line amendment buried in this bill. It's going to make it easier for these corporations to take those reserve funds and reappropriate them, say, into their back pockets or so.
Into executive compensation. That is in this bill, and the way that it's in this bill is the deletion of the corporate mandate. Right now, if you're a corporation doing business in the United States and you have more than 50 employees, if you fail to provide them all with health insurance, it can be minimal, but it has to be, you know, some form of health insurance. If you fail to do that, you have to pay a fine, a penalty to the federal government, which is not quite the cost of health insurance, but close. And they're doing away with that. So there will be no more disincentive to drop health insurance and arguably an incentive to drop health insurance from their employees. And so much for Kellyanne Conway's theory that, you know, if people just want to get off Medicaid, all they need to do is get a job that has health insurance. Those are going to become fewer and far between. So, Rich, you're hypothesis has been fulfilled. Rich, you got to move along, but thank you. George in Chicago. Hey, George, you want to talk about Khrushchev?
Yes, but before you get to that quickly, since you're a gentleman, you wouldn't say what I'm about to say, but your obnoxious and ill-mannered guest has forgotten that in the case of candidates for U.S. House of Representatives, the Constitution requires only that they live in the state that they're going to represent. They are not required to live in the district for which they're running.
Yeah, although politically, it's a mistake. I mean, John Ossoff here was a campaign in which he spent $30 or $40 million, and he couldn't afford to spend $2,000 a month for 6 months for an apartment in the district.
Yeah, I understand the point, but I believe that our founders were, as far-sighted as they were, could foresee the day when a legislature might deal with a political enemy by redistricting his district in such a way that his residence was no longer in it.
Oh, those aren't federal laws, George. Those are state laws. Some states allow you to. Some states require you to live in the district. Other states don't.
Yeah.
Georgia doesn't.
Bottom line, though, is that back in the 1700s, moving was a big deal. Most people never went beyond 50 miles from their birthplace in their life, so that would be a pretty heavy penalty. As far as Khrushchev is concerned, your good friend, who's the professor of emeritus in Russian studies, could speak more authoritatively to this.
Stephen Cohen.
I can't, I believe. But when Khrushchev said, "We will bury you," I believe he was using idiomatic Russian speech, which was purposefully translated in the worst possible light by Cold Warriors. What he actually meant was, "We will be present at your funeral, and we will watch your casket being lowered into the ground." That's what he meant to say.
I've heard that. I've also heard that what he meant to say was, "We will beat you economically. We will be the next superpower, not you."
But it was not an expression of aggressive military intent. It was not a warlike statement.
Right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. No matter how you interpret or misinterpret it, he was not saying we're going to nuke you. And although I'll tell you, the John Birch Society got a lot of mileage out of that statement. They got a lot of mileage out of it. Apparently, they still are. George, thank you for the call and for the clarification. John in Gary, Indiana. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm so appreciative of the work you do, particularly after listening to your conversation with the gentleman, Mr. Manning.
Thank you.
It was something to behold. I originally called about gerrymandering because I'd been listening to, I follow MSNBC on the news and CNN, and over the past several days, and the pundits had been raising this question about the fact that the Senate can't possibly pass this bill because of the effects on the American people. You know, it was like committing political suicide. And what came to mind was that it probably really doesn't matter what they do or fail to do because the districts are so gerrymandered. Looking at in the wake of Ossoff's run in Georgia, that was a Republican district, and I always said to myself, if it's a Republican district, how can anybody expect him to win? It just didn't seem realistic.
But that was the House of Representatives. I mean, in the Senate, every senator is elected statewide, and that's why McConnell is nervous, because you can't gerrymander a state. You can all you can do is pour hundreds of millions or tens of millions of dollars into it, which of course is what the Koch network is doing right now. In fact, they've already started trying to take down Elizabeth Warren and Sherrod Brown. I don't know if it's Koch money, but it's billionaire money. And, our politics in this country have been so badly corrupted by the billionaire class, the right-wing billionaire class. It is mind-boggling.
Yeah. So doesn't your, what you just talked about, your assertion that McConnell's pushing back those tax cuts, doesn't that validate the fact that this really is just a tax cut for billionaires and not really a health bill? Doesn't that kind of validate that? And
I think so.
My question is with everything that's going on, is what is the one or, the simplistic one or two gun message Democrats can pick up on all together in unity and just hammer that in the ground to the American people.
Yeah, it's that this is a $600 billion tax cut for billionaires. And, you know, I guarantee you, John, right now, the meetings that Mitch McConnell has been having and is having are not about how to create a health care bill that actually provides the most people in the United States with the best health insurance possible. It's not about that at all. That's not even on the table. What they're concerned about is shoveling $600 billion of taxes, of money that's being collected in taxes right now back to the billionaires that it's being collected from, and then covering up that fact. So what McConnell has right now is not a health care problem. It's not a legislative problem. It's arguably not even a political problem. It's a perception problem. And so they've got to change the way people are viewing what these guys are doing. And, you know, frankly, I think that they're gonna do that. As I said, my prediction is they're going to push the event horizon out beyond 10 years from now. So when the CBO scores this, it'll come back and say, oh, only 3 million people are going to lose their health insurance in the first 10 years. But then the hammer's going to fall. But with only 3 million people, I mean, Fox has done a great job of you know, dissembling on this up to this point. You can read all about it over at MediaMatters.org. And, you know, there's just going to be more of that. John, I got to run. Thanks.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around. And welcome back. Clayton in Oneonta, New York. Am I saying that any of that right, Clayton? Clayton?
Clayton, yes.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, greetings, Thomas.
Thank you.
Why do we Americans, residents and citizens alike, why do we think, then believe, that our choice between two organized crime families is a democracy?
Because we get to vote?
Crime families. They hardly are parties. A party is where you go and you celebrate.
So, Clayton, what are you going to do about it?
Well, I mean, obviously, we have to first admit that we're addicted to denial.
Okay.
As a nation.
Okay. I think we've passed that point. We're acknowledging our problems.
Right. Well, we're cross-addicted because, first of all, we're addicted to denial. And everybody knows how to clear the hurdle of denial. There's only one way, and that's to be successful and graduate from a rehab and stay that way. Your want has to be greater. Anyways.
Right. Isn't that rehab getting money out of politics, Clayton?
I don't know. It's an organized crime family. We're in denial because we're addicted to lying, Tom. I mean, do you really believe George Washington went to his dad and say, "Oh, Dad, I can't lie. I whacked the cherry tree." That, in its simplistic form, was the first lie that went into our culture.
Yeah, but lies are only dangerous when they're weaponized. When a lie is propelled by $40 million of Koch network money, then it becomes a weapon. It becomes a real lie. It becomes a potent force. If it's just some guy saying something, it's pretty meaningless. So, we don't hold Republicans accountable for their lies because there's an entire ecosystem in which Republican voters can exist without ever being exposed to those lies. They listen to right-wing hate radio, they watch Fox News, and they read right-wing publications, and they think that this is the world as it is. And then there's the rest of us, and then there's people who have seen even beyond what's on CNN and MSNBC and have figured out that, we're being lied to all over the place.
Yes, exactly.
So free speech TV is part of the answer, and getting money out of politics is part of the answer.
Right, but we're such a minimum of energy and desire.
Well, so was David when he took on Goliath. It doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Right, but he didn't have a country that has 1,000 bases that are just cesspools of environmental tragedy around the world. We're just, we're white men who go down and dig up all the poisons and bring it up to the surface and throw it around. And when we're done, we just walk away and leave it.
Yeah.
And we're just lying. I mean, that's what do you want? We're the one and only product of our educational institutions, the one and only product. And you look at this country and all the graduates of college, and we certainly aren't acting like knowledgeable people.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that, Clayton. And but again, I would say that you've got a billionaire running a television network, Fox so-called News. That is one of the biggest parts of the problem. Clayton, thanks for the call. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Bill in Clifton, New Jersey, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I was thinking about back to my Hebrew school days when there was a conversation about the capital punishment, and someone brought up that thing, well, it costs money to jail people and that. And he said, we never equate human life with money. He said that human life is not a commodity.
Right.
And in that sense, I think there should be something in law or amendments or something that every bill or law has to have a human impact statement, and that there should be something codified that using people against money is a conspiracy, like Ford did with the gas tanks.
Yeah.
Making decisions over human life with money is murder. Conspiracy to commit murder.
That's the kind of the mirror image, the opposite of what Scott Pruitt is doing at the EPA, where they're proposing rules that will require all new environmental regulations to have a statement about their impact on industry, rather than on how it's going to protect human beings. They've stripped out the human being part, and they've just put industry in there.
Okay, one other thing. Since the Supreme Court makes our laws now, before they pass a law, why don't they get an opinion from the Supreme Court whether they'll strike it down or not?
Because the court won't give those opinions. That's not how they do their business.
Well, it could be required by law, and it would save a lot of time and know where they are at.
It would also require an open acknowledgement that the Supreme Court is the most powerful branch of government, which is clearly not what the founders intended.
It's subjugated by the House of Representatives.
Yeah, it ain't going to happen. But I get you. I'm totally with you, Bill, on the sentiment. I'm, just how terrible all this is. Bill, thanks a lot for the call. Donald in Aurora, Illinois, listening on WCPT. Hey, Donald, what's up?
Yes, hi, Tom. This business about going to war, they're going to try to drag us into more wars in Syria. I guess there was some kind of thing that came over. Sean Spicer, nobody knows how it came about, but Sean Spicer was saying that they were getting ready to start chemical warfare against the people of Syria, the men, women, and children.
Syria is getting ready to start it. Yeah, is what he said.
But what's really killing me, Tom, is they pull this crap all the time to get us into wars. First they start off with the liberties and the freedoms, the catch-all words to get us in there, and then they go with the women and children. Well, I got this to say to the American people, and I think I said it before. You better think about your children that you're going to go send over there to go fight for these millionaires and billionaires and corporations that want to operate in the Middle East, because that's what this is all about. Don't kid yourself about this nonsense that it's for our protection of our liberties and freedoms and we're Americans. That is a bunch of nonsense. Wake up, America, and start pushing against these wars and start protesting against them.
Amen. Amen. And also let's bring back the draft. Donald, thank you for the call. Cheryl in Ridgefield, Washington. Hey, Cheryl, what's up?
Hi, we miss you really bad on 620. I want to tell you that.
Oh, thank you.
And I was wondering if you have any idea what the salary for the CEOs of the insurance companies.
I don't know.
You don't know? Well, don't you think that would probably pay for Medicare to take care of all, Medicaid to take care of all the people's insurance?
I must have missed a word. What was your first question? Do I know how much the cities owe Medicare?
how much the CEOs and
the CEOs
run the insurance companies. Why do we need insurance companies?
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I know that the largest of the health insurance companies, United Healthcare, their CEO, Stephen J. Hemsley, has taken over $1 billion in compensation, as did his predecessor, Dollar Bill McGuire. He had taken like $1.6 billion, and they reduced it by $300 million because he had taken some of it fraudulently. But, of course, billionaires don't go to jail, so he's just fine. But most of the senior health insurance executives are making between $10 and $30 billion or $1 million a year in their executive compensation. And then on top of that, of course, they get stock options, which can add up to millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. Most of that is pretty opaque. Cheryl, got to move along. I want to get the last call in here for the day. John in Evanston, Illinois. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good. What's up?
Listen, I want to talk about China.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that we've heard endlessly that China is evil, the Chinese Communist Party is bad, and yet I think they created more than 12 million jobs last year, and the standard of living is just going straight up. And they don't appear to be engaged in any wars around the world, and their foreign policy seems to be fairly benign. Have you been to China, and what do you think?
I haven't been to China since '87. I have been about 6 years ago. I was in South Sudan and Kenya and a few other countries in Africa where the Chinese are getting very, very active. They're exporting resources and they're protecting those resources. It's creating some dislocations in African politics, and that conceivably could lead to war. And the Chinese are treating many of their people fairly brutally, particularly the Uyghurs in far western China, the Muslim groups, where they're just cracking down on them. China is not a free nation. It's not a politically free nation. And if you speak out against the government, you can die in China. It's one of the most repressive states in the world in terms of size. I mean, Saudi Arabia is arguably one of the most repressive states, and the UAE and several of these other Sunni nations in the Middle East that are telling Qatar that they have to shut down Al Jazeera. But I think that my biggest concern about China is not their military, although it's not inconceivable that we could end up in a war with China. John Pilger certainly thinks we will. My biggest concern with China is that they have become the manufacturing floor of the United States. That was a stupid policy that we began pursuing in the 90s and has borne fruit today in the opiate addiction epidemic across what used to be the industrialized Midwest and now is the poverty-stricken Midwest. This is a serious problem. John, thanks for the call and thanks for listening to the CPT. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, including you. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
From New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes.
Chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.